People were in a panic as they were chased by an army of the undead. Everywhere, civilians were being bitten and killed when the invasion broke out across the Helios Empire. Amid the chaos, the Empire's strongest swordsman, Aeos, faced off against the Knight of Hell, the Death Knight, who would soon become the protagonist of this story. After exchanging powerful blows, Aeos launched a mighty downward strike, but the Death Knight effortlessly parried the attack, forcing Aeos to his knees. Overpowered, Aeos looked up and acknowledged the Death Knight's overwhelming strength. Suddenly, a crack split through the Death Knight's armored helmet. A sharp pain surged through his head, and in that moment, his human consciousness returned. After years of being trapped under a curse, he finally felt relief. Meanwhile, the Arch-Lich Dorgo cackled, looking down at the Empire as it fell into chaos. He then said, "There's an old saying, the longer the wait, the sweeter the revenge." After finally accomplishing what he set out to do 1,000 years ago, he asked the captured Emperor Howard Adel Light about the joy that he is feeling after bringing down the Empire to its own knees. The Emperor shouts at Dorgo as he drools in tears, saying, "How dare you massacre all of my people?" The Emperor also added, "If the hell is not enough for a filthy devil like him." Dorgo replied in a delighted way, "How sweet, is it a curse?" Dorgo asks the Emperor if he's done talking so he can proceed with the coronation. The Emperor was shocked after hearing what Dorgo said. "You, holding a coronation? What nonsense is that?" Dorgo believes he unified the entire continent for the first time in history, and that being called an emperor is too much. Emperor Howard lowers his head in despair. Dorgo then thanked his Demon King companions for helping him reach his long-desired goal. He asked the Death Knight to bring the imperial crown to him. The other Demon Kings celebrated as Death Knight approached Dorgo with the crown. Dorgo praised Death Knight for being a loyal knight, and said that he played the greatest role in bringing Dorgo in that situation. "How should I reward you for your great service?" he asked. Death Knight didn't reply. Dorgo realized that he asked a foolish question, and that the Death Knight is just his slave, and as he was about to say that serving him is the greatest reward of all, the Death Knight threw the crown mid-air out of nowhere. Death Knight slashed the imperial crown and caused it to break. Everyone was shocked. Dorgo activated his barrier because of his powerful attack. The other Demon Kings realized that their comrade had become an enemy and immediately regrouped to protect Dorgo. He reached his hands to his chest, and he asked him what he's doing, and that he never gave him that order. He thought to himself that he had his defense on, so why was he able to harm him? Death Knight softly said, "Finally, I'm moving by my own will," with a menacing look on his face. Dorgo was in disbelief that the Death Knight had regained his consciousness after erasing it completely. It only looked that way, but the truth is his consciousness never really disappeared, and he was watching everything while he was trapped inside his own body. Dorgo cannot believe what he heard. Moreover, he is astonished because of how great of a masterpiece the Death Knight is for him. So in return for his achievements, Dorgo allowed him to vent his anger, just once only, until he finds a way to take control of the Death Knight again. The enemies charged at the Death Knight altogether. As they were about to hit him, a bright light flashes through Dorgo's face, only to see all of the Demon Kings taken out with a single strike. Dorgo quickly used his trump card, summoning an army of undead. As they stormed toward the Death Knight, a demonic wing suddenly emerged from his back. With a menacing tone, he commanded, "Stop." Then he added, "Surrender, all of you." At his command, the bodies of the undead began to crack and collapse one by one. Unbeknownst to Dorgo, the Death Knight had already absorbed his using a unique ability. Dorgo, trembling, couldn't believe he had created a monster equal to the gods. Left with no other choice, he decided to deceive the Death Knight by pretending to sympathize with him. He thought to himself that even if his body were destroyed, he could simply transfer his soul to another vessel and regain control over him. Meanwhile, the Death Knight said that during all the long years he was trapped inside his own body, he thought of nothing else but killing Dorgo. Gripping his sword tightly with both hands, he began to channel a sword technique, one he had created for the sole purpose of destroying Dorgo, body and soul. Dorgo scoffed at the idea. He didn't believe such a technique could exist. But as the energy around the Death Knight surged, even he began to feel uneasy. The power radiating from the Knight was different, too focused, too dangerous. "This attack," Dorgo muttered, eyes narrowing. "It's too risky. I need to dodge," but it was too late. The Death Knight moved faster than Dorgo could react, unleashing his soul-killing strike with terrifying precision. For a moment, nothing happened. Dorgo blinked, then laughed. "How, of course. There's no way such a technique." Before he could finish, his soul was ripped from his body and dragged into the sky, vanishing into the void. All that remained was his skull, falling silently to the ground. As the Death Knight approached, his heavy footsteps echoed through the silence. Dorgo's skull, as if clinging to some last trace of life, trembled in fear beneath his shadow. The Death Knight raised his foot, and with a cold, final glare said, "Go to hell." At the same time, the Emperor was confused after seeing all that happened. Then the Death Knight collapsed to his knees and said, "It's finally over." But there was one last thing he needed to do. Overwhelmed with guilt, he believed he had to end his own life. With a sorrowful look on his face, he whispered that he needed to apologize to his family, while a memory of him killing his whole family flashes through his eyes, even if he could only see them in death. Blood splattered, the Death Knight lay still, stabbing himself with his own sword as he wanted to repent all his sins. A soft, calming voice, calling his name when he used to be a human, Damien? Then he opened his eyes and saw his sister's image named Louise Haxon. As if he was dreaming, thank goodness. I'm getting to see her before falling into hell, he thought. Damien was surprised, so he asked, "Hey, why do you look so young?" "Oh, my flattery out of nowhere," she replied in a joyous manner. "Are you trying to get on my good side before father scolds you again?" She tells him that he can count on his big sis. As he was lying on the grass, Damien was left speechless when he saw the mansion he grew up in because he was certain that he destroyed it with his own hands. He questioned himself if it's only a dream, or if the whole Death Knight tragedy was just a dream. He saw a stick lying on the ground and thought of using it to test if it was really all just a dream. He stood in front of a huge boulder and charged toward it, striking the center with precision. The stick snapped on impact, but to his surprise, the boulder shattered into pieces. A grin spread across his face as he said, "This is insane." He laughed in disbelief, now certain that he wasn't dreaming. He fell to his knees in the pouring rain, his hand clutching his chest as if trying to hold his heart together, and as tears streamed down his face, he said, "I really have returned to the past." How did I come back to the past? He asked himself. Damien only wanted to apologize to his family, even if it was only in death, but he couldn't believe that he really came to the past. A light from the sky shone on his face, and he said, "Is this a divine miracle?" Damien broke the boulder using a technique called wave breaking, a move that amplifies the impact of a blow several times over. It was a technique he had obtained after defeating a knight known as the Castle Wall Destroyer. However, he realized it wasn't as powerful as it had been before he returned to the past. A servant named Victor came running toward him, panting heavily. "Lady Louise told you to return, so why are you still here?" he asked. He also said that the Patriarch is absolutely furious. Damien was confused and asked, "What did I do?" Victor responded, "Are you seriously asking because you don't know?" When Damien returned to the mansion, the moment he stepped inside, a sword came swinging at him out of nowhere. The blade slammed into the ground, his head was slightly lowered, shadows covering most of his face, but the faint glint of rage in his eyes still burned through. It was his father, Paul Osborne Haxon. "You've truly gone insane. Causing a commotion at a bar and getting kicked out?" He screamed furiously, trying to lunge forward, but his wife and daughter held him back by his arms. Then, Damien realized that he returned to that moment. While his father is still scolding him while being held back by his mother and sister, he lowered his head, as if he were about to cry. He thought to himself how long it had been since his father last scolded him, and how much he missed those moments. His family looked confused by what they were seeing. A tear fell from his eye. "Is he crying?" "Yeah, you were too mean," they said. His father asked what excuses he had this time. He responded, "I have none." His father was surprised by Damien's response. He crossed his arms over his chest, clearly taken aback, and said, "There's no way someone who was always pathetic with their excuses would say something like that." Damien responded that he was aware, and that it hurts hearing him say that. Damien was the son of a viscount, but he had always been a thick-headed troublemaker who constantly brought shame to their family. He borrowed money with the family's land as collateral, and he once struck the son of a noble, and as a consequence, his sister was forced to marry a ruffian. Because of this, Damien was disowned by his father and expelled from the noble house. Despite everything, his sister, Louise Haxon, still chose to help him and gave him money before he left the household, even after he had ruined her life. It was on the day he ran away from the mansion that Damien felt guilt and shame for the first time. He admitted that it was completely his fault, leaving no room for excuses, and told his father that he would make up for his mistakes. With a smile, Damien looked at his family and said that he would accept his punishment properly when he returns home. His family was speechless, and his father muttered, "Did he hurt his head after getting beaten up too much that day?" Damien and Victor returned to the bar where Damien used to drink, intending to apologize. But Victor, visibly nervous, warned him. He was worried something might go wrong, especially with rumors circulating that a group of syndicates was backing the place. Meanwhile, Damien turned to him and said, "If you're scared, you can go back." "Pardon? I can't do that," Victor replied. "You're going, so how could I run away myself?" He reassured Victor not to worry, saying he would simply offer a sincere apology to the owner, so nothing could possibly go wrong. With a concerned look on his face, Victor watched as Damien walked toward the bar. At the same time, Damien wondered how he had come back to the past, but if a god was giving him another chance, he knew he couldn't hurt his family again. As he approached the door to the bar, the two thugs guarding the entrance were surprised he had come back, even after they told him never to show his face there again. "I don't remember well since it's been so long, but they seem strangely familiar," Damien thought to himself. Moreover, he said that he wants to apologize to the owner because of the trouble he caused. The two of them were left speechless by his words. The other thug suddenly laughed and said he was only acting respectable because he was a noble. He mocked him, calling him the roughneck eldest son of a worthless family, but added that he was at least better than he had expected. After hearing what the thug said, Damien felt a slight anger. The thug said that her sister is a rare beauty, and the other said that he suddenly wants to accept his apology if he introduces him to her sister, as he slaps Damien straight to his face. Damien muttered, "Ah, this is so hard," and stole the thug's knife. He overestimated himself, and thought he could just apologize and return back home. The thug was shocked after he took his knife. The thug pointed at him, yelling, when suddenly his hand flew off and hit the ground. He looked down, confused by what he saw. Blood gushed from his wrist as he collapsed to his knees, screaming in agony. The other thug nervously unsheathed his sword while his partner writhed in pain. With a murderous look in his eyes, Damien said, "I'll show you what the roughneck son of the Haxon Viscounty truly is." Victor, watching from afar, was completely shocked by everything that happened, especially after believing that Damien was going to make things right. The thug pointed his sword at him and asked, "Do you even know who we are?" "I don't care who you are," Damien replied. The thug raised his arm, fist clenched, revealing the tattoo on his arm. "No one's ever got away with messing with us, the Black Snake," he declared. At the same time, Damien remembered that Black Snake was an organization that had been expanding their influence in land work around that time, and that this was one of the bars that they've been looking out for. He also remembered the time when he complained about their overpriced food, but they beat him up and mocked him in front of the crowd, and he was forced to pay the overpriced receipt. Damien suddenly smirked and realized that he should be the one receiving the apology. The thug was confused why he suddenly smirked. He warned him just because he's a noble, he would let Damien go without a scratch. He swung his sword with a fierce shout and struck him, but Damien effortlessly dodged the attack and tripped him, causing his face to fall on the ground. Meanwhile, as the thug was coughing, Damien grabbed the thug's feet and said that it wouldn't be enough to kill all of them right away, but he'll endure it for the sake of his family. The thug screamed in fear as Damien grabbed his foot, begging him not to cut it off. But Damien didn't care. After defeating the thugs, he heard someone shout, "Who the hell is that bastard?" He looked to his right and saw more thugs approaching. They wondered if he was from another organization and asked where he was from. Damien replied that he didn't belong to any gang and had only come to apologize, but then realized he should be the one receiving an apology. He added that he had a complaint to make to the owner of the place. The thug was unsure of what Damien had said, so he told him they were just going to beat him up if he didn't talk. Pointing at Damien, he shouted, "Get him!" As the thugs lunged at him, Damien sighed and thought, "This is bothersome." He breathed softly, then suddenly dashed through the thugs at lightning speed, defeating all of them instantly. The last thug couldn't believe what he saw and started to break a sweat. "Damn it, I'm panting just from that, huh?" Damien said, catching his breath. He realized that his current body was still untrained for the skills he possessed. At the same time, the thug begged for forgiveness, hoping to be spared. But Damien chased after him, and the thug ran for his life, crying. Meanwhile, a man suddenly came with his neck twisted so far around that his face was facing backward. It was the thug that Damien chased. Damien said that he went too hard, and that they should have listened when he was being nice. The people inside the bar turned to look at the man who had suddenly appeared. There they saw a man holding a knife and a corpse on the ground, thus causing a panic and making the people leave the bar. The bar owner, Anderson Holm, appeared and was confused as to why the guards hadn't shown up after all the commotion. "So you must be the owner of this place. If you're referring to the guys outside, I dealt with them," Damien said. Anderson couldn't believe that a single man had defeated the members of the Black Snake. He then asked why Damien was making a mess in someone else's business. Damien introduced himself and explained that he only came to receive a simple apology, because after he complained about the overpriced menu, they beat him up and made him look like a drunkard and a troublemaker, which brought shame to him and his family. Anderson grinned and mocked him, saying that the Haxon Viscounty didn't have any honor left to lose. Damien stood in silence. Then Anderson called him a foolish noble and said he would never apologize to someone like him. He told Damien to drop the act and pay up for all the mess he had caused. A sharp grin spread across Damien's face and said, "I see. I was going to forgive you if you offered an apology at once, but if this is how you're willing to play, then so be it." He then quickly pounced from the table toward Anderson and said that he should pay for what he said too. When he was about to strike Anderson, a mysterious man in a black cloak suddenly stepped in and attacked him. But Damien managed to block the strike and noticed a unique aura radiating from him. Anderson thanked the man in the black cloak, named Ted, for arriving just in time. Damien was surprised that someone like him had been hired by a place like that. He then asked why a knight was in such a place, while the knight stared down at him with cold, merciless eyes. The knights walk the path of martial arts throughout their lives, and based on their skill level they are assigned ranks. At the top of the rankings, official knights are transcendent beings who are able to freely use aura, who can cut down mountains with a single strike, and slice through castle walls like paper. Meanwhile, Anderson said that Ted is an apprentice knight who's very close to the boss of the Black Snake, and that Damien is as good as dead. So he's an apprentice knight? That explains the slight aura I felt, Damien responds. To Ted's surprise, he wondered why Damien sensed the aura when he didn't even materialize it. Moreover, Damien understood why such a person works in a place like this. It's because he got kicked out as an apprentice knight since he wasn't talented enough to become an official knight. Anderson then asked him how much it would cost to take care of him. Ted felt offended after being called an apprentice. He clenched his teeth and said, "We'll talk about it later." Ted charged at Damien, shouting that he'd tear his mouth apart first. Damien spotted the incoming sword and narrowly dodged the strike. Without pause, Ted pressed on with a relentless barrage of attacks. As Damien weaved through the blows, he thought to himself, he's surprisingly skilled for an apprentice knight, that his movements are wide, but his attacks are very sharp. As the fight went on, Damien was nearing his limit. He couldn't last much longer with his untrained body. He realized he needed to focus on improving his stamina first. "You brat, let's see if you can dodge this," Ted said. He suddenly took a ferocious stance. Damien was surprised and felt something familiar. In an instant, Ted dashes toward Damien. Damien calmly thought for a proper counterattack. Then suddenly, he remembered a skill he gained after killing a legendary killer named Phantom Assassin, who mastered a secret technique called Blade of Death, a similar technique that Ted used. All of a sudden, with a shocked expression, Ted couldn't believe he had been defeated and collapsed to the ground. Damien looked down at him and thought to himself that it's always been like this. All of my enemies couldn't believe what killed them. After Damien became the Death Knight, he gained a unique ability that allowed him to absorb his enemies' powers and skills, making them his own. Anderson was horrified and started to sweat profusely. He knelt down, pressing his forehead to the floor, begging for forgiveness. Then, he offered a vast amount of treasure as a peace offering for messing with Damien. "I only wanted him to apologize, but I guess I should take whatever he's offering," Damien thought to himself. He told Anderson that it wasn't enough, but he would still spare him. Anderson let out a sigh of relief, dabbing the sweat from his brow. Damien turned his head and told Victor to pack up all the treasure. "I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it myself," Victor thought. He also wondered when Damien had learned all those sword techniques as he gathered the treasure. Later then, while Anderson sends off Damien and his servant, he clenched his fist with anger and thought that he will talk to the boss of the Black Snake and make sure that he will get all the treasure back from Damien. But suddenly, something slashed Anderson's ear. It was Damien, using the Blade of Death technique to cut it off. As Anderson wailed in pain, Damien said he had almost forgotten about the punishment. Looking down at him, he told Anderson to deliver a warning to the Black Snake. If they ever laid a hand on his family, he wouldn't let them get away with it. As he cries in pain, "You won't get away with this," Anderson thought to himself. As Damien and his servant walked away, he thought to himself that he knew this wouldn't erase his past sins, but in this new life he'd been given, he wouldn't disappoint his family again. After a day, they arrived at the Haxon estate. Damien yawned and said that it's been a while since he had a good night's sleep, while Victor said that he couldn't sleep because he was too worried about what happened the other day. "Things might have gone a little off from our original goal, but we got a hefty reward in the end," Damien said. He also said that a rumor would soon spread because of the incident, and it would benefit his family, as they would no longer be taken lightly. As he went on about the public's perception of him, Victor thought that his master had suddenly become self-aware, something he hadn't seen in him before. Moreover, Victor was still worried about the Black Snake, because Damien roughed up not only their members, but also one of their hired apprentice knights. Damien reassured Victor that they wouldn't dare to go after a noble family, and even if they do, he will stop them. Meanwhile, Victor asked Damien when he had learned to use a sword like that, because his swordsmanship was far from ordinary. "Oh, that? I just trained from time to time," he answered hesitantly. Then suddenly someone shouted his name. He turned around and saw his dad running toward him. "You brat! Where have you been all day yesterday?" Paul shouted angrily as he approached. With a firm grip on Damien's shoulders, he asked in a raised voice if he had caused trouble again. Damien told his father to look behind him, and said that he had taken care of the trouble he caused. He revealed the fortune they had received from the bar owner, and they were shocked at the sight of so much wealth, both exclaiming at once, "Holy money!" He explained that the incident had been a misunderstanding, and that he had already cleared it up. The treasure, he said, was given as a token of apology. Paul asked if it was really the truth. "Of course. If you don't believe me, ask Victor. He came with me," Damien replied. He turned to Victor and said, "Isn't what I'm saying the truth?" "Yes," Victor responded. Later that day, while Damien was catching his breath after running, he thought that even though he hadn't moved much, he was already out of breath. He realized he had a lot to do, but couldn't do anything yet, as his body was still too slow and weak. However, he was thankful because he had obtained a tonic from Anderson that could boost his stamina and energy. After drinking the tonic, his stamina was restored, and he thought that if he wanted to get stronger fast, he needed to build up his stamina first. "I have to return to the level I was in my past life," he muttered. He then said that a few years from now, the undead created by Dorgo would appear in this world. He clenched his teeth and angrily said to himself that before it happens, he has to gain the strength to kill Dorgo, so that he will be able to protect his family's happiness. Meanwhile, inside the Black Snake's hideout, a man bit into a juicy piece of roasted meat, a smug grin stretched across his face and grease glistening on his lips. He muttered with a tone of disdain, "He's useless now," as he looked down at Ted. One of the thugs asked what they should do with him. Their boss, Cedric Walker, replied, "Forget it. Dump him." The thug was unsure of his response, and asked if it's really okay. As Cedric wipes his mouth, he answers, "Yeah, dump him somewhere. He's of no use to us anymore. We can buy anyone if we pay enough," he added. Ted suddenly stood up. "So this is how things turned out," he said. Cedric was slightly surprised and said, "Oh, Ted, still got enough strength to stand, huh?" He also told Ted that if he got treated, maybe Cedric would hire him again. Ted got angry after hearing it from Cedric. With his last strength, he unleashed his secret technique and furiously lunged toward Cedric. However, all of a sudden, dark magic grabbed onto his feet and arm, and Ted was shocked. Then, a cloaked man in a dark robe suddenly appeared before Ted and asked, "Boss of Black Snake, can he be the first target for our contract?" Cedric agreed, and said to see what he was capable of. While Ted was telling the man in the black cloak to let him go, the man suddenly chanted a forbidden spell. Then, shadowy creatures with glowing eyes and menacing grins appeared. Ted was struck with fear and shock. Ted immediately begged to be spared, but only a part of his foot remained afterward. Cedric was disgusted by the scene before him, and told the man in black to make his work a little cleaner next time. The cloaked man agreed, and asked about the next contract. Cedric said that someone had harmed their organization, but since the person was a noble, dealing with him was tricky, which is why he called the man in black. With an evil grin on his face, he said, "Just make sure he suffers in some way. The worse the damage dealt, the higher your pay." Cedric handed over the advance payment. The man in black cloak's face twisted into a maniacal grin, forming a wide, crooked smile, and he said, "Leave this to me." After some time, Damien's stamina had increased significantly from training over the past few days. He thought the Black Snake would come after him, but nothing happened. Then, suddenly, a rustling sound came from the bushes, alerting him. He immediately grabbed the person hiding behind the bushes, but to his surprise, it was just his younger brother, Abel Haxon. After being dropped to the ground, Abel said that Damien had gotten stronger since the last time he saw him, and joked that he thought Damien was going to snap his neck. Damien suddenly went quiet as he remembered what he had done to his brother. Then he said, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do it." He reached his hands to Abel to help him get up. But Abel refused and said that he didn't come to Damien to hear an apology, but to ask about the commotion in the bar, because he heard that there was a fight and many people were injured. So he couldn't believe that Damien did that. "Are you lying to your family now?" he asked. "No, it's true. I did that," Damien confidently answered. He still couldn't wrap his head around it, and kept asking how it even happened, because as far as he knew, his brother didn't know how to fight. So he pointed at Damien, and said that he shouldn't do anything that might reflect poorly on their family, as they had already done so much to clean up all his past messes. Damien gently patted Abel's head, and happily thought that Abel just wanted the best for their family, being the diligent son he was. Damien smiled at Abel, and reassured him that nothing bad would happen now. Meanwhile, Victor came running at them, and told them that there's bad news. They rushed to where their family was. Then, he saw his father and mother, along with a noble named Erwin Lionbloom. "You're here?" Erwin said. Erwin also said that he was just explaining to the Viscount for the things that happened at the banquet hall, and because his father found out about it, Damien realized that he already messed with Erwin, because he was supposed to avoid him as soon as possible. Erwin grinned and said, "You remember what happened, don't you?" At that moment, the memory came rushing back to Damien. How, at the banquet, Erwin had mocked him and insulted his sister, and in a fit of rage, Damien punched him square in the face. Little did not Damien know, this was all planned by Erwin to sully the name of the Haxan. Moreover, Damien clenched his fist, and thought that it was odd that someone so close to becoming a knight couldn't dodge his hit so easily. Erwin then smirked and said, "It's embarrassing to say, but I've always admired Miss Louise." With a crooked smile and wild eyes, he proposed a marriage agreement between him and Louise. The Haxan family was shocked by what Erwin said. Damien realized that Erwin had pulled the same scheme in his past life too, taking advantage of their family's lack of wealth. Moreover, Erwin even suggested brushing it off as a simple family issue, so they could all pretend nothing ever happened. Paul refused, saying they couldn't agree to what Erwin suggested because Louise already had a fiancé. Erwin grew irritated by Paul's response. "Then what about the insult I received? Can House Haxan truly withstand our family's wrath?" he said. Erwin then gave them a choice, either pay the price for insulting him or face his fury. Paul nervously thought to himself that the Lionbloom family was one of the most powerful noble houses in the kingdom. But he couldn't let a notoriously lecherous bastard take his daughter. Damien's sister, Louise Haxan, suddenly entered the room and said, "Fine. I'll accept the offer." Her family was in complete disbelief after hearing her say that, and urged her to let them handle it. Abel also said that she didn't have to fix Damien's mess. Damien lowered his head in frustration, thinking he was ruining his sister's life all over again. "I'm okay. I'll go with Sir Erwin," Louise said. Erwin smirked, thinking his plan had succeeded. He stood up from his chair and said, "Miss Louise, you're truly wise." As he walked toward her, speaking about sending a formal request for their marriage, Damien suddenly stepped in front of him and stared him down with seething intensity. Erwin mockingly smiled at Damien. "Damien, do you have something to say? Or should I call you brother-in-law?" he said. As he spoke, Damien silently muttered that Erwin had already ruined his sister's life once, and would do it again. Erwin smirked and asked what he had just said, but before he could react, Damien suddenly punched him, sending him flying through the air. As Erwin hit the ground, Damien looked down at him and said he would never accept him as a brother-in-law. Erwin's guards were alerted by the loud bang inside the room and rushed in. Upon seeing their master lying on the ground, they immediately unsheathed their swords and demanded to know if Damien had hurt him. Meanwhile, Erwin let out a slight laugh and said, "You dare, hit my face not once, but twice." He grabbed his sword and unsheathed it, saying, "You must truly want to die, brother-in-law." Erwin's guards immediately rushed to his side and urged him to calm down, insisting they would handle it. However, Erwin angrily said, "Move." "No, second young master. For a rude bastard like him, I will." Before the guard could even finish, a fist came at him, sending him flying. With rage on his face, Erwin clenched his fist. "I said move," he said. Erwin walked towards Damien and said, "Damien Haxan, I will ask you again. How do you plan on resolving this situation?" Louise tried to stop Erwin, because she knew that he would never let Damien go. But Damien spread his arms to Louise, he smiled and told her that everything's gonna be okay. "Stop sacrificing yourself for me," Damien thought to himself. He then asked Erwin for a duel. "What? A duel?" Erwin asked. "Yes. If you win in a duel of swordsmanship, I'll do as you wish. But if I win, forget everything that's happened until now," Damien responded. Erwin then said that those conditions held no benefit for him, and as far as he knew, Louise had already agreed. Damien mocked Erwin, asking if he was afraid to lose to someone of his level, provoking him to accept the duel. Damien's words made Erwin furious. He thought to himself that Damien was being arrogant for landing a hit just by catching him off guard. But it was perfect timing, as he had been wondering how to make Damien pay. He also added that he will use that opportunity to cripple him and take his sister. Then he smiled maniacally and said, "Fine, I'll accept your duel." As they all gathered in the backyard, Marilda Haxon asked her husband, Paul, to stop them. Seeing how Damien spoke so confidently, he must have something planned. "If not, we can only hope for a miracle," he said, visibly stressed. Meanwhile, Abel strongly disagreed in his thoughts, thinking, "Don't hope for a miracle. Erwin Lionbloom is already on par with an official knight. There's no way Damien will win." On the other hand, Erwin asked Damien how he planned to fight him without a sword. Damien simply smirked and said, "Don't worry. This is enough to deal with you." Everybody was stunned to see a fork in his hands as his weapon. Erwin burst into laughter and said that Damien must have lost his mind from fear. He immediately charged at Damien, saying that he wouldn't go easy on him, but after launching his attack, Damien simply stepped to the side, dodging it. Erwin was surprised that Damien was able to dodge his attack, so he resorted to his sword technique right away. The ground was scarred with sword marks, but not a single one had touched him. His guards were shocked to see that Damien was unharmed. At the same time, Erwin was visibly infuriated and thought to himself that Damien had dodged all the basic moves of his fierce roaring lion sword technique in that brief moment. Meanwhile, Damien thought that, thanks to his training over the past few days, his stamina was able to keep up. He had already analyzed the Lionbloom family's swordsmanship after fighting Michael Lionbloom, Erwin's brother, in his past life. He also added that Erwin is much weaker than his brother. Then suddenly, Damien felt something dangerous was to come. Erwin began to unleash his aura and said, "You must have dodged that by sheer luck, but let's see if you can dodge this." Erwin instantly lunged toward Damien. At the same time, Damien prepared to counter using the Sword Saint technique. A sudden burst of light flared when their weapons collided, making the onlookers flinch. Erwin was flabbergasted to see his weapon stopped by a fork. Then, Damien used a secret move called Countless Thunder Shadow Revelation, sending Erwin's sword flying. Erwin stared at him nervously as Damien charged forward and stabbed him in the neck with the fork. Everyone was shocked by the sight before them. Turns out that Damien only made a scratch through his neck, indicating he won their fight. Erwin, overwhelmed by pain, collapsed to the ground, screaming in fear of Damien. As Damien looked down at him, he thought, "Killing Erwin a dozen times wouldn't be enough for everything he's done to my family." But for the sake of his family, he decided to let it slide. "So, I think we have the winner. You don't have a problem, right?" Damien said. Erwin couldn't utter a single word as he was trembling in fear. "Now, like you've promised." "Get lost," Damien said. Later that day, while the Haxon family was having breakfast, they ate quietly, each lost in thought, still processing the unbelievable sight from yesterday. After all the silence, Damien puts down his utensils and says he'll be off for his training. As Paul watched him walk away from the room, his wife asked, "Honey, aren't you going to ask Damien about what happened yesterday?" Meanwhile, their son Abel rambled nervously, trying to make sense of what he just saw. Marilda kept insisting on asking Damien, but suddenly, Paul told her to stop pressing him for an answer, that he would tell them when the time comes. As he took a bite, Paul nervously thought to himself that he was also curious, but his instincts told him not to ask about it. While Damien was wearing his training equipment, his sister, Louise, came up to him, and when Louise was about to say something, Damien realized that he should apologize for acting recklessly. He assured her that it wouldn't happen again. But Louise interrupted him and gently held his shoulder, saying, "No, it's not that." She then smiled at Damien and thanked him because he stood up for her. She explained that she had actually been scared and truly didn't want to go with Erwin. Damien felt a bit sorry for her after hearing her story. He slightly smiled and said that he should be the one thanking her for all the sacrifices she had done for him. As soon as the words left his mouth, he awkwardly turned around and said that he'd be off to train. But Louise suddenly remembered that she was supposed to hand over a sword from their father for Damien to use in his training. "To me?" Damien asked. "Our father's not good at expressing it, but he loves you a lot," she replied. Damien pulled out the sword and thought that it would be very useful. During the night at the Haxon mansion, an ominous energy seeped across the ground and suddenly subdued the guards. Then, the man in the black cloak appeared. While the entire family was asleep, he opened the door in front of him and saw Louise. Grinning maniacally, he thought to himself that he had come for the Black Snake's request, but considered himself lucky, as there was also a beauty inside the mansion. Suddenly, Damien appeared before him and asked what he was doing. Damien said that he sensed a strange energy, which led him to the room where he saw a suspicious man. The man was shocked. His magic should have put everyone to sleep. He immediately turned around and unleashed a dark magic attack on Damien. As Damien dodged the attack, the man demanded to know his identity. Damien responded by asking who he was, pointing out that this was his house. "Could you be Damien Haxon?" the man asked. Damien responded that he is correct, and angrily asked who he was and what he did to his sister. Meanwhile, the commotion alerted the guards, prompting the intruder to realize it was time to retreat. Damien tried to stop him, but he already transformed into a black energy. But then, Damien noticed a trace of his energy left by the window. Later that day, the servants panicked after discovering a dead horse in the barn and were trying to think of a way to explain it to their master. When suddenly, Damien appeared behind them and said there was no need to panic, as he had only come to confirm something. He held the horse's body and felt the same energy that was left behind by the intruder. Then he realized that it was the same energy he felt from Dorgo, called dark mana. He sensed the lingering trail of the enemy's energy and began to follow it. Meanwhile, in the cave where the dark mage resides, with mocking laughter, he ridicules the black snake boss for foolishly fulfilling all his demands, clearly having manipulated him. But he was still disappointed in himself for having to resort to such low-tier requests just to earn some pocket change. All of a sudden, a man stepped behind him and remarked that his hideout reeked. The dark mage turned around and saw a shadowy figure, who turned out to be Damien Haxon. "How did you find this place?" he asked. "I followed the stench you left behind," Damien responded. The dark mage was impressed because he was able to track him. Damien then held his arm and confirmed that he was the one hired by the black snake. That he smirked and said, "You took on that kind of job, and now you're about to die for it." The dark mage felt belittled. Full of rage, he instantly raised his arm, prepared to attack, and declared that he would make Damien his pet after capturing him. Damien lowered his head and explained that he had made a promise never to kill unless he absolutely had to. But filthy dark mages like him are an exception. The dark mage was shocked that Damien knew he was a dark mage, so he immediately cast dark magic. But Damien swiftly dashed through the flurry of attacks, and was already beneath the dark mage. Without hesitation, he slashed through the dark mage's body. After being cut in half, his body reassembled and left Damien wondering if it's the same ability he used at the mansion. The dark mage made fun of him, saying that his attacks won't do harm to him. Damien was left with no choice. He said that he would just keep cutting him down until there's nothing left of him, and continued his attack relentlessly. The dark mage was impressed by how true the rumors about him were. He also stated that the moment Damien walked in alone, he was already as good as dead. Then, dark creatures suddenly appeared behind him and grabbed his arms. Little did he know, the dark mage had already set a trap in case the church pursued him. This could get really dangerous, Damien thought to himself. With a wicked smirk on his face, the dark mage said that Damien would regret ever crossing a Yu'lon officer. The dark mage successfully captured Damien and bound him in dark magic. He then bragged that Damien had wasted his own life, and that no one could interrupt him anymore. He added that he would now continue his plan to abduct Louise. Suddenly Damien, who had been wrapped in the dark mage's magic, said, "A decomposing type curse, huh?" When the dark mage turned around, he saw that Damien had already broken free from the spell. He was taken aback and asked how Damien had undone his magic. Damien, equally surprised, wondered why he still retained the authority within him. Then he remembered the day when Dorgo bestowed him with authority, the thing known as the power of God, which made him Dorgo's ultimate weapon. He then looked at the mark on his hands, and thought to himself that without a doubt, it was the authority of greed, the same power he had when he was the Death Knight. Out of nowhere, the dark mage unleashed a powerful attack at him, but he was able to dodge in time. The dark mage asked again, "How did you survive my spell?" "Well, doesn't everyone have a hidden trump card or two?" Damien responded. Damien also realized that the dark mage claimed to be an officer of Yu'lon, an organization that specializes in assassination using dark magic, further proving his skills as a dark mage. Then, the bracelet on his arm suddenly glowed. A green energy surged around him, and black marks began to appear on his body. At the same time, Damien thought that the bracelet must be an artifact that stores and conceals mana. Then, suddenly, a monster glowing with a green aura appeared. The dark mage told Damien that there was no way he could handle its power. He then commanded the monster to attack. Thinking he had Damien cornered, he grinned and said that Damien would burn even in death. Damien, who was completely unharmed, suddenly said that the dark mage had gravely misunderstood something. The dark mage trembled in shock as he saw Damien unscathed. Damien explained that the authority of greed doesn't only dispel magic, but it also absorbs all dark mana completely. The dark mage was in disbelief after discovering that Damien had an authority. While taking a stance, Damien said, "That's none of your business. Just think of this as me having better gear." He clenched his teeth and thought that, in order to defeat the enemy in front of him, he had to use the power given to him by the one he hated the most. The dark mage stood frozen in shock as Damien's sword began to glow with a menacing dark aura. A sword technique unique to individuals who possess the Swordmaster title. Damien then gripped his sword tightly and unleashed the soul-severing slash, cutting through the dark mage. After some time, Damien and his servant went to the merchant city called Landwork. Victor noticed the book he was holding and asked Damien why they were returning to Landwork. As they arrived, Damien explained that the book belonged to a dark mage and that he had a task for Victor related to it. Damien hands over the bag. Victor noticed a foul smell coming from the bag. He questioned what was inside, clearly disturbed by the stench. Damien told him that a person's head is inside the bag. He then opened the bag and saw his reflection in the dead dark mage's eye. In shock, he threw the bag at Damien. Damien calmed him down and told him that he'd explain later, but he needed Victor to deliver it to the church. After a while, Damien arrived at the Black Snake headquarters. He scoffed at how the gang had established their base right in the city center, mocking their lack of subtlety. The guards asked him of his identity. He responded by introducing himself as Damien Haxon of the Haxon Viscounty. The other guard focused on his face and realized that he was the guy that their boss was talking about. Damien said that since they already knew who he was, he asked them to move aside quietly. But the other guard suddenly shot his gun, alarming the assassins stationed at every corner. Damien smirked and said that they would regret doing such stunts. Meanwhile, inside the Black Snake headquarters, the corrupt governor of Landwork, Sebastian Baker, and his knight, Robert, were enjoying their party along with Cedric. The governor talked about giving the Black Snake complete control over the bars and the red light district, unaware that Cedric had orchestrated everything to take control of the entire city. Then suddenly, a guard rushed towards the room and called his boss. He informed him that Damien Haxon had rushed to their headquarters alone. Cedric was shocked after hearing the guard's words and thought that the dark mage hadn't done his job properly. Despite suspecting the failure, Cedric dismissed the guard, fully convinced that Damien wouldn't survive since an ambush was already set in place. After a few moments, Cedric decided to check the commotion outside their headquarters, only to see his minions defeated by Damien alone. Shocked, he asked the guard if it was truly Damien Haxon. The guard confirmed that it was really Damien Haxon. He recalled the rumors describing Damien as the useless son of a viscount and never expected him to be this formidable. After that, he was terrified when he realized that the dark mage he had hired had already been taken out as well. That explained the mage's failure to report back. He then walked back inside the room to try and get some help. Meanwhile, the mage pointed his staff at Damien and dared him to dodge his most powerful attack. Flames burst from his staff and shot toward Damien. Damien took a stance, ready to face the incoming strike. The mages laughed confidently, believing Damien had no chance of blocking their fire with a mere sword. But then, Damien swirled the flames and shot them back at the mages. Damien thought that he had already wiped all of Black Snake's minions, when he suddenly sensed something coming at him at insane speed. He immediately turned around and dodged. He realized that the enemy in front of him would be difficult to deal with, especially because of the intense energy he felt from him. Then, Robert menacingly clenched both of his fists and commented on how Damien seemed like just another cocky youth. Later on, Damien found himself surrounded by soldiers and was confused. Why had public servants become involved in the fight? Then suddenly, Sebastian arrived and shouted at him for causing chaos in the city. Alongside Cedric, he introduced himself as the governor of Landwork and declared that he would punish Damien. Damien was surprised that a governor was at the site. He asked why someone like the governor would want to punish him. Infuriated by his response, the governor asked if Damien even grasped the scale of what he had done. Being deceived by Cedric's pleasant demeanor, the governor saw him as a generous businessman, unaware that he was actually a scheming gang leader. With a sinister smile, Cedric felt confident that Damien wouldn't be able to touch him because of his strong political influence. Damien then flicked his fingers and called Cedric forward, landing a strong punch to start. Damien knew Cedric had connections within the city administration, but based on earlier observations, it looked more like blind devotion. He then mocked the governor's poor judgment for labeling a man like Cedric, a complete scoundrel, as a kind businessman. Sebastian, despite his official position, continued to stand by Cedric, and even offered Damien a lighter sentence if he begged for forgiveness. However, Damien refused the offer. As a result, Sebastian had no choice but to let his knight deal with him. Robert reached for his weapon and walked toward Damien. He ordered Damien to drop his weapon and surrender. Damien mocked him by pointing out that even the city's guardian knight had decided to intervene. Robert grew irritated and asked why there wasn't even the slightest hint of fear in Damien's eyes. Damien confidently explained that he wasn't afraid. Impressed by his reply, Robert smirked and then suddenly swung his sword at Damien. Damien quickly dodged the attack and thought to himself that, despite his bold claims, he wasn't yet strong enough to take Robert head-on. He decided he just needed to buy some time until the backup he was expecting arrived. Damien took a heavy blow to his arm, sending him flying. When he landed, he realized that Robert's punch had still dealt significant damage, even though he had tried to deflect it as much as he could. He looked behind him and wondered why his ally had not yet appeared. Suddenly, Robert caught him off guard and charged at him, asking where his focus was. Damien had no time to dodge the attack, but the backup he was expecting suddenly arrived and deflected Robert's strike, sending his axe flying. Everyone was in disbelief when they saw someone stop Robert's powerful attack. Robert's hand trembled from the impact as he asked for their identity. She then removed her cloak, revealing her true identity, a paladin. Robert was left confused upon seeing a paladin aiding Damien. Before the incident, Victor came to the church panting. "Is this a branch of the Holy Church?" he asked. A nun approached him. "Yes, what is it?" she responded. While he was handing over the bag and the notebook, he said, "My lord asked me to get this to the church as quickly as possible." Victor explained that the bag contained the head of a dark mage. After hearing what Victor said, the nun's expression shifted to seriousness, and she asked for the notebook. She immediately sensed the faint presence of dark magic within it. But then, she noticed a familiar symbol on the cover. Without hesitation, she grabbed the bag, looked through its contents, and saw the head of the dark mage that she had been hunting for a long time. She quickly took off her nun outfit and asked where his master was. Meanwhile, in the present time, her face flushed as she looked at him. "Are you Damien Haxon?" she asked. "Yes, I am," Damien responded. She then said that they had received the evidence he sent and told Damien to leave the rest to them. Cedric and Sebastian were shocked to hear that the church would be involved. The nun, who turned out to be a paladin, thanked Damien for helping bring justice to the governor's corruption and for delivering Agito's head. Damien felt relieved knowing that the paladins were now on his side. She then said that the church had received a report about someone making contact with the wanted dark mage in the city. Then, she declared that the church would be in charge of the whole city. Sebastian was infuriated that the church would be ruling the city since Landwork is a city that is supposed to be self-governed by the kingdom. She refused to accept his assumption because the church overrules the authorities of the kingdom. As Sebastian wanted to protest about this issue, she went mad. She threatened him and his knight to be the prime suspects of working with the dark mage. She pointed at Cedric and accused him of being the mastermind who supported the dark mage. She believed that the very act of protecting the dark mage was already suspicious enough. Sebastian was shocked after hearing her words and asked Cedric if it was true, but Cedric denied it because it was too outrageous. She then showed the notebook that once belonged to the dark mage, which contained records proving that Cedric had purchased every malicious item the mage required. Cedric was furious upon realizing that the dark mage had kept detailed notes of every transaction between them. He insisted that he had nothing to do with the dark mage and claimed the whole thing was just a misunderstanding. She then told the guards to arrest the three of them. As they were being brought to the carriage, Sebastian saw Damien and his servant watching them, grinning after their plan had worked out. Sebastian was anxious since he had no clue what those fanatics would do to him. Cedric asked Robert if he would just surrender that easily without putting up a fight. He looked down at his weapon and suddenly broke free of the guard's restraints and instantly grabbed his weapon. Believing he would be killed either way, he swung his weapon at her and shouted his intent to kill and escape. Cedric smirked as he watched Robert wreak havoc. Meanwhile, after dodging his attack, she clenched her fist and called him a fool before driving a punch straight into his stomach. Cedric and Sebastian could not believe that their strongest knight was defeated with one punch. She declared that anyone who disobeys the will of God, no matter who they may be, shall face divine punishment. Meanwhile, Damien and Victor were grinning and mocked Cedric that he's not as scary as the rumors say. Cedric was in disbelief he was caught because of only one person. Damien then looked at the paladin and said that it was thanks to her. Everything was settled nicely. He also thought that she was stronger than he thought she would be. He assumed that based on the state of her sacred power, she was probably the apprentice of the Azure Flame, whose name is Brigandine. Brigandine was known as the strongest person in the church, one of the 5 great saints, famous for eliminating many heretics. She approached Damien and expressed her gratitude for taking down an officer of Yulon. She acknowledged his contribution and said he wouldn't face any charges, even after calling the church to cover up his assault on the Black Snake. Damien was impressed by how easily she could see through his intentions. He then bowed down and apologized, explaining that he feared he may have offended her, and clarified that the Dark Mage not only cursed their territory, but also brought harm to his family. She was speechless after hearing Damien's story, so she concluded that he's no longer accountable. She informed Damien that the bounty on Agito's head would be paid soon. Damien asked if there had been a bounty, and how much it was. She replied that it was 1,000 gold. Victor was surprised at the amount of gold. However, Damien wanted to receive something other than money if possible. Victor couldn't believe Damien was turning down the reward, even after spending their family's resources. She reassured him that it was possible and asked what he wanted in return. Damien requested to receive one of the mana cultivation techniques held by the church. The paladin appeared confused, considering how powerful he already was, enough to wipe out the Black Snake on his own, yet he was asking for training techniques. Damien reflected that he only won against the Dark Mage because of the power granted by the authority, and realized that to face stronger enemies in the future, he needed the cultivation techniques used by the church's knights. He admitted that he had only mastered basic level techniques, which is why he was seeking something more advanced. She was amazed to learn that he had reached such a level using only basic cultivation. Sensing the flow of powerful aura within him, she quietly wondered if his claims were true, then his potential was extraordinary. She imagined that he would cut down a heretic without hesitation and offered him the opportunity to become a paladin. The two of them were speechless after seeing a glow behind her and hearing her speak with a divine tone. Damien bluntly rejected the offer. Agnes reacted in disbelief and collapsed slightly, asking why he would refuse. Suddenly shifting to a serious tone, she burst out that becoming a paladin was the highest honor granted by God. A chilling aura radiated from her as she questioned whether he understood how difficult it was to attain that position. Victor, now terrified, hid behind Damien. Damien felt guilty about his answer and tried to come up with a convincing excuse. Clearing his throat and placing his hand on his chest, he responded with solemnity that he was not yet worthy of receiving God's love. Standing back, Agnes repeated Damien's words, saying she too was unworthy of God's love. Agnes then introduced herself, realizing she hadn't given her name earlier. She told him her name was Agnes, and that she was the first apprentice of the Azure Flame. Damien's expression shifted subtly as he realized she was the very first disciple accepted. He then respectfully greeted her, saying it was an honor to meet her, and asked if he may now finish his business. Agnes calmly told him to proceed, and asked what business he meant. Cedric moved forward, his face twisted with fury. He suddenly paused, his anger turning to shock as he realized something. The next moment, Damien was gripping Cedric by the collar and holding him up in the air. As Cedric groaned, Damien looked down at him with scorn, remarking on his large stomach with cruel amusement, as though striking him had felt like hitting a cushion. Cedric's face twisted in agony, and he let out another pained curse. But Damien wasn't finished. With another sharp kick, he sent Cedric's body crashing across the ground, the impact heavy and unforgiving. From a distance, Agnes and Victor watched the scene unfold in silence. Damien exhaled slowly, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over him. He looked down at Cedric's broken form, clearly pleased with the outcome. Victor, still stunned by the violence, turned to Damien and asked if the ordeal had finally come to an end. Damien gave a faint, almost weary smile and confirmed that it had. Elsewhere, chaos stirred in the Lionbloom mansion. Holland Lionbloom burst through the doors with urgency, shouting for his son. He stormed into a room that had clearly been ransacked, furniture overturned, the air heavy with the remnants of fear and violence. His eyes locked onto Erwin, who lay huddled under a blanket on the bed. Startled by the sudden arrival, Erwin looked up at his father, his voice faint and unsure. Holland didn't waste a second. He crossed the room in quick strides, the sound of his boots echoing against the floor. He leaned over Erwin, his face shadowed with concern, demanding to know what had happened. Erwin trembled beneath the blanket, his voice breaking as he explained that someone had attacked him. At first, he claimed it was with a knife, then corrected himself, saying it had been a fork. His confusion and fear were evident. Holland placed a hand on his son's arm, furious at the sight of his once cheerful child now reduced to a shaking mess. Rising to his full height, he turned toward the nearby guard and servant, his voice sharpened with rage as he demanded the truth. The guard hesitated, then reluctantly admitted that the attacker had been Damien of House Haxon. The tension in the room cracked like glass as a nearby vase toppled and shattered. Holland flinched, his fury igniting like fire. The very thought that someone from House Haxon would dare harm his son filled him with outrage. He immediately assumed the worst, that Damien must have used some underhanded tactic to strike at Erwin. Inside the Haxon mansion, Agnes stood with her escorts, her posture upright and formal. With a graceful hand placed over her chest, she introduced herself to the master of the house as a paladin affiliated with the church. The Viscount, Paul Haxon, along with his wife Marilda, reacted with mild surprise. Paul, clearly caught off guard, offered a reserved welcome, while Marilda followed with a gentle greeting. However, Paul's expression soon darkened as his eyes drifted to the background, where Damien stood quietly. An irritated thought crossed Paul's mind, bitter and accusatory. To him, Damien was a troublemaker, and now, to make matters worse, the boy had brought a religious zealot right into their home. Pulling himself together, Paul addressed the paladin with forced composure, stating that Damien had already briefed him about her arrival and mentioned she would be staying for some time. Agnes acknowledged this, explaining that her presence was tied to an ongoing investigation involving a heretic, and she hoped for the family's cooperation. Paul appeared reluctant at first, pointing out that their home wasn't particularly spacious and accommodations might be difficult to arrange. Without a word, Agnes lifted a bulging sack of coins and presented it to him as a token of the church's gratitude. At the sight of the money, Paul's demeanor shifted instantly. Smiling broadly, he placed a hand to his chest and assured her that she should treat the mansion as her own and rest comfortably. Later, as Paul and Marilda slipped away with their unexpected windfall, Agnes approached Damien. She offered a polite thank you for allowing the investigation to be conducted on the estate grounds. Damien responded indifferently, still trying to process how her earlier request had turned into a personal visit to his home. He hadn't expected her to show up in person. Agnes then asked if she might inquire about something else, something personal. Damien turned toward her with mild curiosity, asking what she meant. Looking at him intently, Agnes told him that the subject of interest was him. Her tone was soft, her hand again placed over her chest. From a distance, Paul and Marilda observed the exchange with eager curiosity. Paul gave a knowing thumbs up, while Marilda clasped her hands together, visibly excited, wondering what deeper connection the paladin sought with their son. Agnes soon handed Damien a pair of thick books, explaining that they were the mana cultivation manuals he had requested. Damien expressed his gratitude, but was puzzled by the presence of two books. Agnes clarified that one was a sword technique manual, and she had included it because offering a cultivation guide without a matching technique felt incomplete. Damien reflected on this. He didn't particularly need sword techniques, but there was no harm in having them. Still, he was surprised. These manuals were unlike anything he had seen in his past life. Sensing his amazement, Agnes admitted that acquiring them had been difficult. She emphasized the effort it took, revealing that internal opposition within the church had nearly prevented it. Acknowledging her struggle, Damien remarked on the lengths she had gone through. Agnes confirmed it, stating that in the end, she had to invoke the authority of her master. She then explained that after sharing Damien's story with her master, she was told that he might be the kind of chosen one the church needed. Closing the distance between them, Agnes gently took his hand and once again asked if he would consider becoming a paladin. Damien quietly pulled his hand away, declining once more. Agnes fell silent, momentarily lost in thought. Composing herself, she smiled politely and acknowledged his decision, saying she wouldn't press further. With a final word, she told him that if he ever changed his mind, he need only come find her. Then, she turned and walked away, leaving Damien standing there. He watched her go, his expression unreadable. Inside his mind, he reaffirmed what he had suspected all along. Agnes was, without a doubt, a fanatic. Her devotion bordered on obsession, and it was both fascinating and unsettling. Meanwhile, within a shadowed cave once used as a dark mage's hideout, Agnes' escorts were busy combing through the remains. One of them called out, drawing the attention of his partner. The man pointed toward the remnants, his expression troubled. He questioned whether the circumstances seemed suspicious. His companion, peering through a magnifying glass, asked for clarification. The first escort elaborated, revealing his concern about a figure named Agito, an elusive and powerful member of the heretical group Yulon, notorious for repeatedly evading the church's pursuit. Despite Agito being part of the weaker curse school, the man found it hard to believe that such a figure had fallen at the hands of a mere rural noble. The second escort quietly admitted that he too had his doubts. Still, he suggested finishing the investigation before bringing up concerns. But just as the thought settled, Agnes's voice rang out. She appeared before them, calm yet commanding, and told them they could trust Damien Haxon. Both escorts immediately tensed. One stammered her name, clearly caught off guard. Agnes acknowledged their doubts, but reaffirmed that Damien had told no lies. Still, the escort confessed his lingering confusion. It was hard to believe that someone like Agito had truly been defeated by Damien. Agnes reminded them that the method had already been explained. The two exchanged surprised glances, confused. Had it? Damien's voice then echoed, calm and confident. He recounted the event simply. He had dodged the attack and cut off Agito's head. The escorts were stunned. One repeated Damien's words in disbelief. Agnes bowed her head slightly, recalling the day when his servant had delivered Agito's severed head. Even she had doubted him at first. That was why she had observed him instead of intervening. Her memories flooded back, of Damien single-handedly overwhelming dozens of men without a scratch, of him deflecting a fireball conjured through magic. It had been astounding. The escorts were visibly shaken. One gasped aloud, questioning if such feats were even possible. Agnes calmly affirmed it was. She elaborated that those who reached the level of swordmaster were said to be capable of deflecting any attack, even magic. While she wasn't claiming Damien had reached that level, she made it clear that he was no ordinary warrior. With a more serious tone, Agnes confessed the deeper reason for her visit. While the official purpose was to pursue Yulon, she also intended to bring Damien to her master. She believed he could become a vital asset to the church. She instructed her escorts to set aside their doubts and focus on completing the investigation. Elsewhere, 3 knights galloped across a sunlit field. One of them held high a white flag adorned with the lion bloom crest. Among them, Alpus stretched his arms and sighed with relief, noting their arrival. Riding beside him, Lavender wrinkled his nose in disgust, complaining about the foul odor surrounding them. Alpus smirked and explained that it was simply the smell of cow dung, a rare scent for city folk like Lavender. Lavender grimaced, cursing under his breath and asking if anyone had cologne. He was clearly worried about the stench lingering on them. Up ahead, Garrick, their leader, silenced the chatter with a sharp command. The other two quickly quieted as they followed him. As the Haxon estate came into view, Garrick confirmed its identity with Alpus, who verified that they had arrived. Garrick then asked about their mission, to which Lavender responded bluntly. They were there to arrest Damien Haxon. Garrick sneered at the thought. In his mind, capturing someone like Damien would be effortless. But he reminded the others that simply arresting the boy wouldn't erase the humiliation suffered by young Master Irwin and the Marquis. As they approached the estate, an elderly man walked across the field with a slow, measured pace, leaning on his walking stick. Garrick rode toward him and addressed him harshly, asking if he was a resident of the estate. The old man, clearly startled, confirmed he was and hesitantly asked what this was about. Without a moment's pause, Garrick unsheathed his sword and decapitated him in a single ruthless stroke. As the lifeless body hit the ground, Garrick calmly sheathed his blade. In his mind, the man had committed an unforgivable offense, failing to bow before the lion bloom crest. The other knights looked on silently from their horses. One of them, Alpus, wondered to himself if the old man had been blind. Garrick, now in a darker mood, ordered Lavender and Alpus to prepare. His eyes glowed red with bloodlust, a vicious grin stretching across his face as he looked toward the distant estate. There, standing unaware, was Victor sweeping quietly. But the sudden arrival of the knights caught his attention. He looked up sharply, his body stiffening as he realized something terrible was about to unfold. As Agnes and her escorts stepped out of the collapsed cave, she addressed them with calm professionalism. The site had caved in, she explained, which limited the amount of information they could extract. Nonetheless, she offered them a warm smile, assuring them that they had performed admirably. Suddenly, one of the escorts froze and turned his head sharply. His eyes widened in disbelief at the sight before him. Seated upon a rock not far from them was Damien, his body encircled by a current of swirling blue energy and delicate streams of water magic. The ethereal energy danced around him with mesmerizing intensity, centering especially around his face, as if he had become a conduit for the elements themselves. Agnes stood stunned, captivated by the sheer force and elegance of what she was witnessing. She couldn't quite comprehend what she was seeing, but the display was undeniably incredible. Her mind began to race. This had to be the destructive energy technique she had taught him, a method designed to allow the user to absorb vast quantities of mana from their surroundings once properly mastered. Yet seeing it in action so soon, barely hours after introducing the method, was beyond what she had anticipated. The speed of his progress was nothing short of astonishing. Damien sat motionless, eyes closed, entirely absorbed in the meditative process as the blue energy flared brighter around him. Then, without warning, his eyes opened wide. His gaze landed on Agnes and her escorts, and a gentle expression softened his features. Rising from the rock, he approached them with deliberate steps. With the book in hand, Damien handed it to Agnes, silently signaling that he had been working while they were gone. Agnes took the book and studied it briefly, her sharp eye recognizing the clear signs of progress. Damien, however, dismissed it humbly, admitting it was only a little. As he glanced down at the book again, he recalled Agnes's earlier words. She hadn't exaggerated. The knowledge within truly had been difficult to obtain. As a sword master in his previous life, the swordsmanship within wasn't particularly valuable to him, but the cultivation method, especially the destructive energy technique, had proven to be a treasure. Designed to support the energy-intensive destructive sword technique, it enabled rapid mana recovery, and even allowed temporary absorption of external mana. Their brief exchange fell into a moment of stillness. Then Damien glanced up, commenting that it was already dinner time, and suggested they return together, noting that a meal was being prepared. But his expression quickly darkened. A sudden wave of oppressive energy washed over him, an unmistakable sensation. Bloodlust. His voice sharpened with clarity as he declared the presence of intruders. His eyes gleamed with faint blue light as he calmly announced that urgent business required his attention. Without waiting for a reply, he instructed Agnes to make her way back at her own pace. Then, with a blur of motion, Damien vanished. His speed was astonishing. Agnes could only watch in awe. An escort beside her echoed her thoughts aloud, marveling at Damien's blinding velocity. Agnes silently noted that such movement, executed with so little mana, must require extraordinary control. A question lingered in her thoughts. How far could this man's limits truly extend? As Damien continued his flight, his eyes now glowed a piercing red. The question remained unanswered. Back at the Haxon mansion, chaos erupted. Lavender's fist crashed into Victor's face, sending him staggering backward before collapsing face first to the ground. His body lay still, bruised and bloodied. Lavender stood over him with grim satisfaction. Garrick, towering beside him, erupted with fury. The very sight of Victor resisting him ignited his rage, and he roared for Damien Haxon to be brought before him immediately. Despite the pain racking his body, Victor raised a trembling hand from the dirt. His battered face lifted slightly as he refused, his voice strained and defiant. He knew they had no intention of negotiating fairly, only of harming Damien. In the distance, Paul and a servant rushed out of a nearby building. Paul's voice rang out clearly, his tone commanding. He ordered them to stop at once. Lavender turned, irritation flashing across his face. Paul stood tall, his expression unwavering as he confronted the aggressors. Garrick addressed him directly, identifying him as Viscount Haxon. At Victor's side, Paul immediately checked on his condition, rage burning behind his composed facade. He demanded to know why a civilian had been attacked with such brutality. Garrick responded with a cold and calculated tone, claiming that whatever had happened here was nothing compared to what House Haxon had done to House Lionbloom. He issued an ultimatum. Marquis Lionbloom was demanding the surrender of Damien Haxon. If they complied quietly, he promised, their lands would remain untouched. Paul glared back at him, muttering the name Lionbloom with disgust. He had anticipated retribution, but not such lawless barbarity. He could see through the lie and remained silent, jaw clenched, fury simmering beneath his skin. Then, with unmistakable conviction, he declared that he would never hand over his son. Garrick eyed him, issuing a final warning. Did he truly believe he wouldn't regret this decision? Paul answered without hesitation, and with that, Garrick issued the command to destroy everything until Damien emerged. Paul shouted in protest, enraged, but his voice was drowned in the growing storm. Then came another voice, fierce, familiar, and unmistakable. A shout echoed across the estate, demanding to know if the invaders had gone mad. Paul turned in surprise, his eyes widening at the sight before him. In the distance stood Damien, cloaked in a swirling aura of dark energy. He faced away from Lavender and Alpus, calm yet imposing. Both knights froze, their expressions twisting with confusion. Garrick tilted his head, silently wondering how Damien had appeared so suddenly. Damien stepped forward, walking straight through the formation of armored knights without a hint of hesitation. Lavender's eyes tracked him warily, demanding to know his identity, but something felt wrong. A paralysis crept into his limbs, a fear that rooted him to the spot. He couldn't move. Damien knelt beside Paul and quickly asked if his father was all right. Paul nodded but expressed deep concern for Victor. Damien's attention turned to the wounded man, his expression hardening. He remarked that it was fortunate Victor had been born with such a durable body. Otherwise, the assault would have ended his life. Then Damien made it clear. If Victor had died, he might have slaughtered all three attackers where they stood. Alpus reacted with rage, cursing Damien aloud. Garrick, unaffected, addressed Damien directly. He confirmed the young man's identity and mocked him, referring to the rumors of his insubordination and branding him a madman. He suggested Damien's confidence must have come from some cheap trick used to defeat a noble. Damien questioned the accusation with a faint smirk, but Garrick didn't entertain a reply. Instead, he gave the command, break Damien's legs and force him to kneel. Lavender and Alpus charged instantly. Damien stood motionless until the very last moment, then calmly caught Lavender's incoming strike with his bare hand. A surge of excitement lit up within him. This was the perfect opportunity. At last, he could test the mana he had been storing with the destructive energy technique. With a sharp twist, Damien dislocated Lavender's arm, prompting a scream of agony. Then he slammed an energized fist into his chest, hurling him backward like a rag doll. Alpus shouted his comrade's name, but before he could respond, Damien was already beneath him. A fierce upward kick exploded against Alpus's chin, lifting him off the ground and flinging him into the air. Garrick watched in stunned silence as both of his allies crumpled from Damien's blows. Amid the wreckage, Victor stirred. With great effort, he whispered Damien's name. Damien moved toward him and crouched down. He asked if Victor was all right. In response, Victor raised a trembling hand and gave a weak thumbs up. Damien stared at him for a moment before his lips curled into a faint smirk. With quiet amusement, he murmured that Victor truly was a fascinating man. Garrick dismounted his horse and walked straight toward Damien, suspicion etched across his face. He questioned how Damien had managed to escape Lord Irwin's schemes, clearly bewildered by the young man's level of skill. But Damien met his gaze with calm defiance, offering no explanation, only a cold, dismissive reply that deepened Garrick's doubts. A sudden realization washed over Garrick. His eyes widened as the truth pieced itself together in his mind. It all made sense now. This wasn't the Damien Haxon he had known. Fury overtook him as he accused the man before him of being an imposter. Garrick shouted that the real Damien had been replaced. This one must be a pawn, hired to sabotage Lord Irwin and drag House Lionbloom through the mud. His paranoia ran wild, seeing conspiracies where there were none. Damien remained unfazed, watching Garrick unravel. With a flat tone, he insulted Garrick's intelligence, clearly unimpressed by the outburst. Boiling with rage, Garrick reached for his sword, preparing to strike. Nearby, Alpus subtly shifted, deciding it was safer to play unconscious for the time being. Paul, worried, called out to Damien. Victor, determined and hopeful, urged him to win. As Garrick gripped his sword tighter, he analyzed his opponent's stance. He convinced himself that Damien's luck had simply run out. If the imposter dared take even half a step closer, Garrick would end it in a blink. He attacked first, swinging his blade with intent to kill, but Damien effortlessly deflected the blow, a small, knowing smirk tugging at the corners of his lips. He admired the knight's form, silently acknowledging that the Lionblooms had finally sent someone worth facing. Garrick charged again, only to have his thrust expertly parried. He tried to rationalize it, telling himself it had to be a fluke. Desperate, he unleashed another attack with a shout, daring Damien to block it too. Damien did more than that. He stood tall, calmly deflecting the barrage of strikes. His voice was laced with disdain as he remarked on Garrick's sluggishness. The taunt enraged Garrick further. Damien seized the moment. With eyes briefly glowing a faint violet, he lunged forward. His strike landed cleanly. Garrick staggered back, blood seeping from his ear. He couldn't even track the movement. Before he could regain balance, Damien struck again, this time with a powerful kick that sent Garrick crashing to the ground. As the knight skidded across the courtyard, Damien's voice cut through the air, cold and deliberate. "The hit," he said, "was for Victor." Garrick groaned but forced himself upright, his anger undimmed. He unleashed one final attack, shouting the name of his most powerful technique, a dramatic display of strength and speed meant to end the fight. Damien, unimpressed, dismissed it as noise. As their blades clashed once more, he overpowered Garrick easily, shattering his sword and severing his arm in a single, decisive slash. Garrick screamed in agony, collapsing to the ground. Both Paul and Victor stared, stunned by the outcome. Victor finally whispered in awe that Damien had won. But it wasn't over. Hearing the defeated knight gasp in pain, Damien turned toward him. Garrick, cradling his wound, mumbled desperately about the pain and tried to stop the bleeding. Damien approached and pressed his sword to Garrick's throat. Garrick's defiance was gone. In its place was panic. He begged for his life, insisting that Damien had won and pleading for mercy. Damien gazed down at him with cold contempt. He revealed his identity with sharp clarity. He was, in fact, the real Damien Haxon. And Garrick should have begged much sooner. He reminded the fallen knight of the harm he had done, not just to his family, but even to the servant he'd disfigured. And now, when the tables had turned, he dared to ask for mercy? Cowering and writhing in pain, Garrick stammered out a half-hearted apology. But Damien wasn't satisfied. With a smirk, he pointed out that Garrick still didn't understand who truly deserved the apology. Just then, footsteps approached. Victor had stepped forward, now beside Paul, holding a wooden bat, ready to back up his lord if needed. Garrick lay on the ground, utterly defeated, while Victor, still unsatisfied, asked Damien if he could continue the assault. To Damien, the idea didn't seem entirely wrong. Paul placed a hand on Damien's shoulder, urging him to stop, saying it was already enough. As Garrick knelt and pleaded, he desperately apologized to Sir Haxon for all the disrespect he had shown, while Damien stood silently, cold and unmoved. Paul's face twisted with rage, declaring that an apology alone could never make up for the brutality he had suffered. Still filled with fury, Paul insisted that if his son lacked strength, things would have ended in disaster. As Garrick remained sprawled on the ground, Paul shouted furiously, claiming that without his son's power, their land would have been destroyed and the Marquis family would have subjected his son to horrors. Garrick, still on his knees with his head bowed in submission, added to his desperate plea, begging for the torment to end. Paul stared down coldly as Garrick continued to cry out for mercy. Paul's face remained silent, but hardened with unwavering resolve. He turned to Damien, leaving the decision in his hands. Damien spoke with confidence, explaining that he never truly intended to kill their enemies, knowing such an act would completely sever ties with House Lionbloom. His piercing gaze revealed the conviction that if he were acting alone, he wouldn't have hesitated to unleash his full power on the Marquis family. Damien understood that he couldn't give in to his full fury, not with his family's safety at stake, but he also knew that letting the enemies go now could invite dangerous retaliation. Suddenly, a voice called his name. Damien turned, surprised, just as Agnes burst through the gate, running toward him and demanding an explanation for the scene. Caught off guard, Damien paused and thought, "Hold on," as he watched Agnes approach, silently hoping she'd prove useful once more. Agnes surveyed the destruction, her eyes lowering as she tried to process the chaos, pausing with a hand to her chin in thought. Raising a finger, Agnes declared she could solve Damien's difficult dilemma, prompting his surprised curiosity. With pride, Agnes announced that they had eliminated one of Yulon's top officers, which meant House Haxon could now be officially recognized as an allied house, a clever solution that finally brought a smile to Damien's face. Paul explained how this particular outcome could help save their family from crisis, which led Victor to question whether such an alliance was even worthwhile. Damien quickly grabbed Agnes's hands, urging her to accept their crucial request, and a flustered Agnes agreed without hesitation. Damien let out a triumphant scoff, knowing he had finally secured the church's protection. But then he excused himself, saying he still had unfinished business. Damien shot a menacing glare at the wounded Garrick, ensuring everyone heard the confirmation of their critical alliance. He ordered Garrick to report to House Lionbloom and make it known that House Haxon was now under the full protection of the church. Damien's intense stare lingered on them as he issued a chilling warning against using force again. With burning eyes, he declared that anyone who defied them would face the full wrath of the church. Having made his declaration, Damien then commanded them to disappear. The three knights scrambled through the gate, retreating as Victor shouted after them that they should consider themselves lucky, while Damien watched them flee. Victor cheered at the enemy's panicked retreat, claiming they could finally breathe, but Damien responded with an unsettling doubt. As the enemies vanished, Paul called for a family meeting, saying it was time to plan their next steps. Wasting no time, Paul announced that their only agenda would be their ongoing feud. He clarified that the conflict was with House Lionbloom specifically. Abel immediately raised his hand, questioning why the feud still mattered now that they had the church's protection. Louise quickly countered Abel's assumption, pointing out that the church wouldn't intervene deeply. As Abel demanded more clarity, Paul firmly agreed with her. With his hands clasped, Paul explained that the church didn't get heavily involved in noble disputes. He added that House Lionbloom's power extended far beyond just military strength. Paul warned that the Lionblooms had many ways to destroy smaller noble houses like theirs. He quickly presented their best options: either pay a huge sum to appease the Lionblooms or find protection from an even more powerful house. Just as it seemed all options were exhausted, Agnes suddenly spoke up, announcing there was still one more path. She revealed their last hope: Damien could become a paladin, her eyes bright with excitement while Damien looked conspicuously bored. The room fell silent as Paul, Louise, and Marilda lowered their gazes, shocked by Agnes's bold suggestion, while Paul looked visibly stunned. Damien quickly shut the idea down, bluntly refusing to become a paladin. Paul admitted that the paladin path was no longer viable, and Damien, accepting that reality, called out to his father. Abel exploded in anger, yelling downward while Damien flinched at the intensity. Then Abel calmly adjusted his glasses and asked why Paul had so easily accepted Damien's refusal, when becoming a paladin could end all their troubles. With a smirk, Abel pointed directly at Damien, insisting he be forced into paladinhood, while Agnes looked on with satisfaction. Abel, still furious, argued that it all began with Damien, so Damien needed to take responsibility. Paul darkly ordered Abel to sit down, stating that they had a guest. Abel clicked his tongue in disapproval at Paul's sudden assertion of authority. Paul interjected that not everything was Damien's fault. He added that even without Damien's intervention, the man wouldn't have surrendered so easily. In truth, Damien had stepped in to protect Louise from a scheme orchestrated by the Marquis' second son. Then Paul called Damien's name. With tears in his eyes, Paul told Damien he had done well. Paul praised Damien for standing up to those who insulted their family and for getting revenge, leaving Damien stunned. He hadn't expected such words from his father. Damien lowered his head and said it was something he had to do. Paul responded to Damien's determination by saying he would take responsibility now and demanded the chance to be a proper father at last. Suddenly, a servant burst in, apologizing and announcing that a messenger from House Goldix had arrived. Paul demanded to know what business the Duke of Goldix had with them. The servant stuttered, searching for the right words. He then revealed that Damien had recklessly borrowed money, using the family's wheat fields as collateral, and the debt was now due. Damien realized the depth of his mistake as his father heard the news. Paul scolded him harshly for acting without his knowledge. Shaking with disbelief, Paul suddenly shouted Damien's name in fury. Meanwhile, the guest had arrived and offered a formal greeting to Damien. The guest, whose name was Oland Mishi, announced that he had come regarding the arrangement they had previously agreed upon. He presented a lengthy document that detailed the terms of their agreement. Damien recalled how Olin had sweet-talked him into using his family's land as collateral, promising it would be an easy way to earn money. Damien realized he had been lured in by empty promises and manipulation. Olin then demanded to know the total amount Damien owed him. With a cold tone, Olin revealed that, due to the accumulated interest, Damien's debt had reached 300 gold. The amount left Damien stunned, recoiling in disbelief. Though shaken, Damien confirmed the debt, admitting to himself that his family had no way to pay such a large sum, and that losing their land could mean being cast into the streets. Olin explained that if Damien failed to repay the debt today, the land would immediately be handed over to Dash and Cash. He added that Duke Goldpixie had ordered strict debt collection, regardless of the borrower's status, and insisted Damien provide the money at once. He coldly asked whether Damien had the funds or not. Looking down in shame, Damien confessed that he couldn't come up with the payment. Olin was momentarily surprised. Then, with a twisted smile, he realized the full weight of the power now in his hands. He took a seat and told Damien that borrowing money without the ability to repay had been a foolish decision. Suddenly, the guards began to close in around Damien. Olin calmly announced that he would now collect the debt in his own way. Facing the guards, Damien confessed he had always known he wouldn't be able to repay the loan. Olin, deep in his thoughts, admitted to himself that while he loved money, he enjoyed watching a noble grovel even more. He wondered how Damien would respond now that the tables had turned. Olin smirked wickedly, savoring the moment. Meanwhile, in another room where the Haxon family had gathered, Paul appeared deeply anxious. Marilda urged him to sit down and rest, worried about his relentless pacing. Louise turned to Abel, telling him to calm himself as well. But Paul shouted that he couldn't stay still while their entire family stood on the edge of ruin. Abel lashed out in frustration, furious that no one was acting while their future crumbled. Marilda and Louise remained seated, placing their trust in Damien to resolve the crisis. Marilda expressed her faith that Damien would succeed, just as he always had. Paul sighed and remarked that while Damien excelled at swordsmanship, fighting and negotiating were two very different things. At that moment, Damien suddenly slammed one of the guards to the ground. Olin was caught off guard, clearly shocked. Damien feared that Paul would soon reprimand him for losing control again. One of the guards, enraged, swung his sword. Damien responded with a burst of magic and grabbed the guard by the neck, choking him. He was immediately scolded for drawing a weapon against a noble. With a smirk, Damien asked if this situation could count as self-defense. Olin, now bound in chains, let out a furious yell. As Damien approached, Olin began trembling with fear. Damien ordered him to unfasten his leg restraints, and Olin obeyed. Standing face to face with him, Damien stated that he could not repay the debt at this time. Olin, visibly defeated, tried to convince himself that it was acceptable. Leaning closer, Damien offered to repay the debt in another way. Olin's face trembled in fear as he agreed to Damien's terms. The next day arrived. Abel, disheartened, spoke to Paul. Standing with Louise and Marilda nearby, Abel lamented that justice had been crushed by violence. He questioned the dire circumstances they now faced, but Paul silenced him and urged him to support Damien in his journey ahead. Paul admitted he was worried about Damien's plan. Outside, standing with Agnes, he remarked on their looming separation and bid her farewell. Damien expressed his gratitude, and Agnes replied that she had only done her duty. She revealed that their investigation was nearly complete and that her departure was scheduled for the following day. Damien smiled as she wished him a safe journey, and he thanked her sincerely. Agnes then expressed her hope that Damien might reconsider becoming a paladin, but he refused once again. Damien announced that it was time to go. As they stepped inside, he complimented Olin's carriage, noting how spacious it was. Olin welcomed them aboard, assuring them the trip would be free of any inconvenience. Victor confirmed that all preparations were complete. Damien then declared that it was time to depart. The carriage set off swiftly, bound for House Goldpixie. After some time, Damien and Victor looked up from their carriage, stunned by the breathtaking sight before them. They had arrived at the grand Goldpixie estate, and Damien noted it was a home truly worthy of the kingdom's wealthiest family. Damien thanked Olin, who bowed before him, and promised him a reward in the future. Olin informed him that the Duke was already waiting inside. As Olin stood with a polite smile, his expression twisted internally, seething as he remembered how he'd been worked harder than a beast, less a servant and more a slave. Watching them depart, Olin muttered a dark curse in his mind, secretly hoping Victor would die so his own plans could unfold perfectly. Damien tossed a casual thanks over his shoulder as he walked away. Inside the estate, Duke Adam Goldpixie confronted them, immediately calling out Damien Haxon's name in surprise. Resting his chin on his hand, Adam mocked Damien, labeling him the notorious troublemaker of the Haxon family. Unbothered, Damien responded with a faint smile, honored by his infamy, though inwardly he scoffed, thinking all nobles were the same. Standing beside his advisor, Jael Heimlich, Duke Adam demanded to know why Damien had sought him out. Damien cut straight to the point, revealing that he had borrowed money from the Duke's family business and that the debt was now due. Adam's scorn shifted to amusement upon learning that Damien was merely a customer of their financial network. Damien admitted he was broke and boldly asked if there was another way he could repay the debt. Adam raised his head with interest, asking what sort of alternative payment Damien had in mind. With a confident smirk, Damien made a bold offer. He would defeat the Lionblooms to clear what he owed. The Duke burst into laughter, amused by the audacious proposal, while Jael looked on in shock. The armored guards nearby exchanged wide-eyed looks, clearly caught off guard by the claim. Adam laughed harder, realizing Damien must have heard the news, and Jael confirmed his assumption. A newly discovered gold mine had triggered a heated conflict between the Goldpixie and Lionbloom families, with the matter to be settled in a duel between their champions. The duel ended in an instant, the loser's sword clattering to the ground in defeat. The result was a crushing victory for Lion Bloom, whose knight loomed ominously over the fallen opponent. With the gold mine's immense riches, the Lion Blooms had rapidly expanded their military forces. As a result, the Gold Pixie family's influence began to crumble. Damien finalized his plan. If he could secure victory for the Duke, his debt would be erased. He also saw it as the perfect chance to contain the rising threat of House Lionbloom. Intrigued by his determination, Adam asked for proof. Was it true that Damien had defeated the Lionbloom family's second son? Adam then escalated the questioning, asking whether Damien was also responsible for dismantling the massive organization in land work. Standing tall, Damien confirmed that all the rumors were true. Adam appeared intrigued, admitting the offer was extremely tempting, as he had been desperately searching for a worthy champion. With full confidence, Damien presented himself as the ideal candidate, the only one capable of defeating the Lionbloom's eldest son. Nearby, a knight named Ernst was visibly stunned by the sheer boldness of Damien's claim. Ernst questioned whether Damien could really defeat such a formidable foe, but Damien answered with nothing more than a confident smile. Damien then acknowledged that the eldest Lionbloom's son was famed for his genius on the battlefield. Still, with a self-assured smirk and a thumbs up, Damien claimed he was just as talented. Ernst urgently warned Adam that the rumors about Damien were likely exaggerated, and Adam calmly acknowledged his point. Ernst Howitz continued, growing agitated, insisting that Chelsea would surely bring back a more suitable candidate. One of the knights confirmed that Lady Chelsea had already spent a full month searching for the perfect champion to face Michael Lionbloom. The other knights quickly agreed, voicing their belief that Chelsea would return with someone exceptional. Adam admitted their arguments held merit. As Ernst glared at him, Damien gritted his teeth in frustration, mentally screaming that their pompous faces were ruining everything. Adam casually remarked that he was merely reporting what his men thought. Damien recognized this as a test and began formulating his response. He resolved to prove his strength right then and there. He declared that everyone in the room was gravely mistaken, drawing stunned looks from the surrounding guards. One guard cried out in disbelief, shocked by the intensity of Damien's words. Damien boldly proclaimed that he alone could win the duel, far surpassing any knight Chelsea might bring back. He condemned their entire debate, calling their arrogance repulsive. A voice from the crowd challenged him. How could he be so sure, not even knowing who Chelsea would bring? Damien fired back, offering to prove himself by blocking his opponent's strongest attack. Ernst was left speechless by the reckless challenge, but the arrogant knight in question only sneered, confident in his superiority. Ernst roared in disbelief. Damien dared his opponent to strike with all their might, saying he only needed to block a single blow to prove them wrong. The knight's face twisted in rage at Damien's smug grin, incensed that someone of lower status could be so confident. Ernst turned to Adam, requesting permission to humble Damien. Adam, clearly entertained, granted it with a smirk. Without delay, Ernst and Damien squared off in the grand hall, while Adam and the others watched from a raised platform. Victor, anxious, questioned the sudden duel, but Damien waved him off, saying the fight had already begun. As Victor watched in horror, Ernst summoned a blazing red aura. Victor silently thought that his master's opponent might actually be in danger. Jael then gave the signal for Ernst to start. Ernst accepted the command, officially beginning the duel. He said he'd forgive Damien, but only if he got on his knees and begged. Impatient, Damien demanded they start already. Ernst gripped his weapon and warned him that he was asking for death. Damien scoffed at the oncoming strike, asking mockingly if this was supposed to be the ultimate move. He briefly second-guessed whether his provocation had gone too far. Snapping, Ernst lunged in blind fury, vowing to drive the blade through Damien's skull. The weapon surged with unstable energy, glowing an intense blue. Damien raised his sword and mocked the attack, calling it a predictable mid-tier technique. He intercepted the blow calmly, confident he could block it since the trajectory was easy to read. And suddenly, the pressure shattered Damien's sword into countless shards. Ernst leaned in with a sinister grin, calling Damien a fool who had fallen straight into his trap. Gasped in shock and agony as a black substance burst from a fatal wound in his chest. Victor screamed in horror, calling out for his master, while Adam stared in utter disbelief. Jael remained silent, his expression dark. Damien's foot recoiled from the force of the impact. Ernst stood frozen in disbelief, unable to understand how his target withstood the surprise assault. Jael and Adam, too, were left stunned by the unexpected outcome. Damien smirked, boldly proclaiming that the title of representative now belonged to him. Victor rushed to embrace his master tightly, but the young master groaned, claiming it was the hug that actually hurt. From a distance, Adam looked on in disbelief, struggling to accept that Damien had survived Ernst's devastating strike. Adam's disbelief slowly transformed into admiration, his lips curling into a confident smile as he realized Damien's true strength. He turned to address the vassals, confidently announcing that Damien Haxon had proven himself worthy. As promised, he formally promoted Damien Haxon to the position of representative. Ernst shouted in outrage, unable to accept Adam's sudden declaration. But Adam silenced him with a stern expression, revealing there was still one condition tied to the promotion. With a fierce glare, the Excellency ordered silence, his voice booming with authority and shutting down all protest. He then warned the assembly not to spoil his good mood with further complaints. Meanwhile, Ernst seethed internally, struggling to understand how his well-aimed attack had failed. Damien momentarily thought Adam was being too harsh toward Ernst, but Adam clarified that the man wasn't incompetent, he had simply chosen the wrong opponent. Adam revealed that his own level had already surpassed the middle-class threshold. He admitted his involvement had violated the rules, which restricted duels to low-class fighters. To support his claim, the swordsman lit his blade with a radiant aura, demonstrating the blistering speed of a middle-class warrior. Privately, he praised his own performance, certain that his entire intervention appeared perfectly genuine. He silently confessed that without his covert mana shield, the young master's attack would have been truly dangerous. Adam turned to face Damien directly. With a pointed gesture, he insisted on tending to the internal injuries Damien had surely sustained. Without delay, he began the treatment, slipping a brightly glowing ring onto his finger. With a swift motion, Adam summoned a dark portal, which Damien immediately recognized as a subspace magic tool. From within it, Adam retrieved an ornate box that pulsed with a vibrant blue aura. Holding the box forward, he declared that the gift was meant solely for Damien. Damien stared at the box in stunned silence, instantly recognizing the legendary energy it radiated. When opened, the box revealed its contents, glowing golden artifacts known as balance pills. Adam explained that acquiring the pills had cost a fortune at the famed alchemy school. Damien understood that the pills would enhance his physical capabilities, much like a powerful supplement he had once taken. Adam elaborated, stating the pills not only boosted training, but also healed internal injuries, prompting Damien to thank him sincerely. He finished by expressing high hopes for Damien's future, leaving him to quietly reflect on the path ahead. Damien responded with solemn acceptance, as if taking on the challenge laid before him. Later that day, by the next morning, Damien could already feel the effects of the balance pills. His internal injuries were nearly gone. Examining the training tools before him, Damien noted their quality as he readied himself to resume his practice. Suddenly, someone stepped forward, demanding to know if he was Damien Haxon. Damien stared back at the man and immediately demanded his name in return. The man laughed dismissively and introduced himself as Pabel Bermond. He identified himself as a low-class knight and introduced his two blood brothers who stood by his side. With their swords drawn, Pabel and his brothers stepped forward, announcing their intent to participate in the upcoming duels. Pabel noted that they had been training elsewhere the previous day, implying that Damien was lucky they hadn't witnessed his earlier accomplishments. He emphasized the importance of the duel with the Lionblooms, claiming the fate of the duchy was at stake. With a sneer, he added that he hoped Damien wouldn't disgrace them with his pitiful strength. Completely unfazed, he brushed off Damien's presence and any implied threat. Damien, however, saw the confrontation as a perfect chance to assess the strength of the duchy's knights, a question he had been eager to answer. Taking a deep breath, Pabel suddenly shifted into stance, initiating his signature move, Immovable Akalanatha. His blood brother followed with his own secret move, Ascending Phoenix, launching himself forward with powerful momentum. As he struck, the blood brother clashed swords with Pabel, whose fiery counter neutralized the attack. He shouted that this was their 98th duel, and he intended to win. The fight intensified. Pabel's face twisted in pain as his brother's strike connected, but he skillfully blocked the blow using only his forehead, catching his opponent off guard. Impressed, his blood brother bowed and admitted he had learned something new that day. As they discussed the fight, the knights noted the duel would take place in 1 month, confident their training would bring major improvement. They expressed unwavering belief that their progress would lead to victory over the Lionblooms and raise the duchy's prestige. With their swords held high, they declared their shared goal with passion and pride. Their expressions hardened with fierce resolve as they united in spirit, determined to demonstrate their strength for the duchy. As the group solidified their unity and ambition, Damien watched quietly from the sidelines. Noticing Damien's darkening expression, Victor asked what was troubling him. With a heavy sigh, Damien turned to Victor and admitted he feared their duel was already doomed. Startled, Victor asked what he was talking about. Damien snapped back, saying he had no faith in winning the duel with knights as pathetic as those. Meanwhile, Adam erupts in laughter, mocking the unbecoming behavior of a high-class knight. Jael insists that Adam's taunts do not affect him. She presses Adam to be honest about his feelings, but he insists that he truly means what he says. Last night unfolds to reveal Damien declining an offer, and instead stating he prefers training in solitude. He questions Damien, wondering if he had other plans. He reflects, surprised that Damien would refuse training from Jael Heimlich. Adam speaks about Damien Haxon's interesting nature while he laughs softly nearby. He continues to speak. He asks Jael what he thinks of Damien. He states Damien is an exceptional young man. He highlights how Damien used mana in a split second to block Howit's strike. He emphasizes that executing such a feat is beyond the capabilities of ordinary individuals, as magical energy swirls around him. Adam questions the odds of their upcoming duel, as Jael wonders if they can truly defeat House Lionbloom. He admits making definitive statements is difficult. Jael declared that even if Damien performs well, winning requires 2 victories in the upcoming 3-way duel. Adam walks away, reminding Jael that victory hinges on the other knight's performance and questioning their training. Jael responded that Sir Vincenzo is training the other knights and believes there's nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, Damien realizes a significant, unexpected problem has surfaced. The knights spar in the training hall as someone notes their terrible physical shape. They acknowledge that the knights look good but lack substance. He internally despairs, convinced that defeat is inevitable given their current skill level. Damien despairs over the situation, realizing he must intervene. Damien shouts at 3 armored guards. The 3 guards, Pable among them, look utterly bewildered by Damien's sudden outburst. Damien strides toward the 3 guards, while one questions if he just called them punks, and the other suggests they have a sparring match. The guard laughs, scoffing at Damien's audacity. One of them notes Damien must have guts to challenge them after witnessing their skills. Responding to Damien's challenge, he boldly steps forward, declaring that he will be the first to accept. Damien, with a serious look and glowing eye, reveals he doesn't just want to fight one of them. Damien confidently demands to fight all 3 guards simultaneously. The guards stand speechless after Damien's bold challenge. Pable cries out, shocked by Damien's declaration. Enraged, she calls him an arrogant brat. He accepts the challenge, ready for battle. Pable declares that battling mad dogs requires bending the knight's code, and that a beating is the best solution. Damien faces down 3 aggressive guards ready to brawl. Fists surge toward Damien's face as he remains calm. Suddenly, Pable lies defeated on the floor. Pable, stunned by what just transpired. With his foes downed, Damien questions if they've finally awakened. Pable's eyes widened. Pable watches as Damien scoffs at his fallen opponents, dismissing them as pathetic. Victor questions why the young master is causing trouble again. But Damien retorts, claiming he's just teaching the Duke's knights a lesson, leaving the awakened man utterly shocked. Now clutching his head in confusion, Pable, struggling to recall anything after the initial assault. I remember us attacking him together, but I can't remember anything after that. Then he remembered as they all charged at Damien. All of them unleashes a simultaneous, but Damien easily dodges it, and easily defeated 2 of his brothers. As Pable thinks she caught him off guard, Damien delivers a powerful punch to his jaw, sending him flying. His face contorts from the brutal impact. Damien didn't stop there because when he was in midair, he keeps on hitting him till he loses consciousness. Down he goes, succumbing to unconsciousness as he falls. Meanwhile, Pable wonders if they were all knocked out, realizing Damien overwhelmed them. He questions what kind of monster he is. Pable thought, T.O. think he'd overwhelm all 3 of us. What kind of monster is he? Damien rolls up his sleeves, boasting that he didn't even break a sweat. Damien demanded to know who trained them. Distressed, they reveal they're being trained by Sir Sebastian Vincenzo, a mid-class knight. He questions the mid-class designation while they confirm it. He ponders the level of training, and although tempted to advise them to quit, he decides against stirring up unnecessary conflict. Damien tells them to find him after Vincenzo's training, stating they will spar with him daily, leaving them stunned. Pable worries that if Sir Vincenzo sees them getting beaten up, he will think something is wrong. Damien smirks with confidence, assuring them not to worry. He continues, promising to spar with them without causing any visible injuries. Pable and his blood brothers are shocked to realize they are physically unharmed despite the beating. One of them wonders how this is possible. Back in the day, Damien learned how to beat people in a very specific way. Word spread of a man traversing the land, devoted to reforming criminals. This man was known as the character corrector. The method of reform was simple. He beat them for an hour straight. If that didn't work, the character corrector doubled the duration. Legend tells of someone enduring a staggering 512 hours of relentless punishment. Even the character corrector started to pity his bloodied victims. And he wondered, how can he beat someone without endangering their life? Years later, he mastered the art of inflicting pain without leaving a mark. Damien reveals that he used a secret art on them, one that inflicts pain without any visible marks, then asks if they understand. Distressed, Damien utters that they are worthless as they kneel. But he assures them there's nothing to fear. With a confident smile, he raises his finger and declares that he will transform them into useful, worthless bugs within a month before the duel. The trio kneels, utterly stunned by Damien's declaration. Victor scratches his head, wondering what he's planning next. Damien declares they need to get back to training. Suddenly, Damien spots a man rushing toward him in the hall, calling out to him. Now, the attendant informs him that Adam seeks him. Damien wonders what's going on. The attendant stated that Chelsea had arrived. Chelsea entered the hall and knelt, a knight behind her, announcing her return. Ernst observed her arrival with relief, grateful she was unharmed. Adam confirmed aloud that a month had indeed passed. He asked Chelsea if she had managed to find a knight for the duel. Chelsea answered confidently that she had. Adam's gaze shifted to the knight standing behind her. The knight introduced himself as Guillermo Blackwing, known by the title The Wild Beast. The other knights immediately recognized the name, identifying him as a famed mercenary who had fought in the Aclaren Kingdom's war. They added that no low-class fighter could possibly defeat him. Adam smiled, admitting he had heard much about Guillermo. He acknowledged that Guillermo's title was well earned through his ferocious, beast-like conduct in war, and the two men shared a laugh. Guillermo chuckled, amused that even the Apple Kingdom knew of his reputation. Chelsea proudly declared that Guillermo had sworn loyalty to them and agreed to fight in the duel. She smiled with certainty, believing Guillermo would surely defeat Michael Lionbloom. Chelsea further insisted that Guillermo would prove himself stronger than Michael Lionbloom. The other knights boasted that while Michael Lionbloom strove for perfection, Guillermo had already achieved it. Adam admitted Guillermo's arrival was good news, but warned that it also created a complicated situation. Chelsea frowned, demanding to know what he meant. Adam revealed that he had not yet introduced another candidate. He announced that Damien was the representative chosen for the duel. Chelsea and Guillermo turned sharply to face him. Adam formally introduced Damien Haxon as their representative. Damien smiled confidently as the introduction concluded. Suspicion flickered in Chelsea's eyes as she studied him. She angrily demanded an explanation from her father, accusing him of acting without waiting for her return. Adam responded firmly, stating that although she had found Guillermo, he had never promised to step aside. Chelsea demanded that Adam change the representative. Adam paused, considering the issue, and admitted he needed more time to decide. Chelsea's temper flared as she shouted, insisting she had never even heard of Damien. She argued furiously that Guillermo deserved the position far more than a no-name knight. Guillermo smirked as his eyes locked on Damien, who thought the man looked strangely familiar. Adam cut off the debate, refusing further argument. He defended Damien, stating that despite Guillermo's fame, Damien had proven his strength by blocking Howitt's ultimate attack. Chelsea lashed out at Adam, accusing him of hypocrisy toward her and her mother, but Adam furiously silenced her for causing a scene before their guests. Her anger instantly melted into fear as she begged for forgiveness, blaming her outburst on exhaustion from the journey. As she gestured toward the seated Adam, Damien observed the tense exchange, thinking, "Seems like they have quite the grudge against each other." From his desk, Adam decisively ended the argument, instructing them to discuss the matter later, while Guillermo stood silently by. Suddenly, Guillermo erupted into wild, booming laughter. Cutting it short, Guillermo told Chelsea that words were meaningless, that only action could settle the dispute. Jael sternly warned Guillermo that his behavior was disrespectful. Guillermo dismissed the warning and declared that the strongest warrior should rightfully be the representative. He proposed that they resolve the matter with a duel, the victor earning the position. Chelsea furiously shouted at Guillermo for daring to intervene, but Adam calmly conceded that his point had merit. With the challenge now on the table, every gaze turned to Damien for his response. Damien instantly recognized this confrontation as yet another exhausting test set up by the Duke. He knew proving himself would require a display of skill. Damien agreed that the strongest should fight in the duel, but declared that a battle between them was unnecessary. Guillermo blinked in shock, baffled by the announcement. Damien then confronted him directly, challenging Guillermo to fight immediately and decide the matter once and for all. Guillermo's eyes narrowed, his expression hardening with cold intensity as he readied himself. With a mocking laugh, Guillermo seized Damien's arm, threatening to rip it off. Damien answered with a calm smirk, promising instead to dislocate Guillermo's shoulder. A yellow glow ignited in Damien's eyes, his predatory grin confirming the deadly intent behind his words. Guillermo scoffed, dismissing it all as a bluff. His own eyes flared with a fiery red as he lunged, reaching to seize Damien's arm. But Damien instantly reversed the move, flipping Guillermo's armored body through the air and slamming him into the ground. The hall froze in stunned silence, every witness struck motionless by the impossible display of power. Chelsea gaped, her mind reeling as she thought, what just happened? Jael, captivated, found the display nothing short of extraordinary. He recalled the critical detail. Guillermo had made the first move, attempting to grab Damien's hand. Jael realized Damien hadn't overpowered him, but had redirected Guillermo's immense strength against him. Channeling the force through his palm, Damien slammed Guillermo down with a brilliant surge of blue energy. Jael smirked, recognizing that Damien possessed not only raw power but remarkable skill. Flat on the ground, Guillermo seethed with humiliation, demanding to know how he had been defeated so easily. Damien smirked, unsurprised by the outcome he had anticipated all along. He calmly remarked that Guillermo was tougher than expected, admitting he had genuinely tried to dislocate his shoulder. With eyes burning red, Guillermo gripped his axes, vowing silently to shred Damien apart. In a burst of rage, Guillermo unleashed a twin-axe assault, the blades wreathed in dark purple energy. Chelsea screamed for Sir Guillermo in panic, horrified by his furious strike. With a deafening roar, Guillermo swung his axes downward, aiming to split Damien's skull. Guillermo raised his axe high, unleashing a devastating downward slash. Yet his ferocious attack was suddenly halted mid-swing, leaving him staring in pure shock. His face twisted with fury, only for green energy to erupt around him, forcing him to freeze. Before the axes could fall, Jael's eyes widened in Jael's voice thundered with wrath as he demanded to know how Guillermo dared ignore the Duke's command. Turning his fury on the mercenary, Jael bound him within a crushing green aura, scolding him for the disgrace of drawing a weapon in the Duke's presence. With one eye glowing menacingly, Jael coldly asked if Guillermo truly wished for death. Guillermo grunted in pain, his armored legs trembling beneath the overwhelming pressure of Jael's magic. Damien calmly assessed the scene, instantly recognizing the immense weight of the aura as undeniable proof of Jael's high-class rank. For the sake of Chelsea's honor, Jael declared he would let the matter pass, this once. But his warning cut like steel. There would be no second chances. Having established his authority, Jael calmly sheathed his sword, ending the tense confrontation. Struggling for breath, Guillermo fell to one knee, utterly crushed by Jael's display of power. As silence settled over the hall, Adam broke it with a dry remark about the needless commotion. He gave his verdict, recommending Damien retain the position of representative. Ernst immediately objected, shouting that the duel had not been fair. He argued furiously that Guillermo had been disadvantaged, still weary from his long journey. Chelsea, her voice passionate, sided with Ernst, demanding a proper duel to compare their skill rather than relying on what she called a childish scuffle. Adam's sharp voice cut her off, ordering her to stop pressing the matter. But Chelsea erupted again, refusing to accept her father's decree. At last, Adam's patience snapped. With a furious slam of his fist upon the desk, he seethed, "I'm telling you, T.O., stop bragging about your incompetence." His overwhelming force crushed Chelsea's protests, silencing her instantly. Humbled and shaken, Chelsea turned away, admitting in a low voice that she had spoken out of line. Ernst groaned, exhausted by the endless political strife. Finally, Damien stepped in, calmly addressing the Duke and asking if he might accept Lady Chelsea's proposal. Chelsea stared at him in disbelief, unable to believe what she had just heard. Adam's expression flickered with mild surprise at Damien's unexpected offer. Later, Victor confronted his young master in private, demanding to know why he had accepted the duel when doing nothing would have cost him nothing. Still gripped with worry, Victor warned that Damien was only inviting disaster. But Damien retorted sharply that every move had its purpose and ordered Victor to stop nagging him. They soon arrived at a building, and Damien asked if this was the smithy the Duke had specified. Adam, smiling, had indeed promised him a new longsword forged there to replace the one shattered against Howitz. Damien grinned, boasting he could defeat Guillermo with a mere training sword, yet admitted he saw no reason to reject the Duke's gift. The smith's eyes widened in shock as they entered. Inside the workshop, Victor confirmed their presence, stating they had come on the Duke's explicit command to retrieve Damien's sword. The smithy master greeted them warmly, confirming their expected arrival and ushering them deeper inside. As they walked through the glittering armory, glass cases displaying rows of gleaming weapons surrounded them. Mesmerized, Damien declared the weapons astonishing, even teasing Victor if he wanted one too. Excited, Victor eagerly asked if he might choose something expensive. But Damien's attention sharpened suddenly, his gaze locking on a particular sword displayed within a case. That sword is definitely, he thought. The smithy explained that the unique blade had been commissioned by a duchy knight who left abruptly before it was finished, leaving it unclaimed. Damien, his expression intent, immediately asked if the knight had provided the legendary, unified ringing steel for its forging. The smith froze, stunned by Damien's knowledge, and demanded to know how he recognized such a rare detail. Damien explained that the blade's form bore a striking resemblance to the legendary works of the sword musician. Hoisting the glowing blade, Damien claimed it without hesitation. The smithy challenged him, demanding why he would choose a sword forged from unified ringing steel despite its infamous properties. Damien calmly explained that unlike rare metals that merely amplified mana, unified ringing steel refined it, tempering mana into powerful resonant waves. Holding the glowing blade aloft, Damien demanded its true name. The smithy revealed that its name came from the knight who had commissioned it. At last, he declared it had been meant to be called the 1,000-Mile Sword. Sheathing the weapon, Damien left the smithy with Victor at his side. As he admired the blade, a young maid suddenly approached, bowing politely. She introduced herself as Rebecca, Lady Chelsea's attendant, and inquired whether Damien had found a weapon to his liking. With a knowing smile, Rebecca confirmed her role as Chelsea's personal aide. She then invited Damien to meet her lady, asking if he might spare some time. Damien flatly replied he had nothing in particular to say to Lady Chelsea. But Rebecca smirked knowingly, replying that Lady Chelsea had far more to offer than he might expect. She added that Chelsea could provide him with something essential, causing Damien's expression to harden in thought. Pensive, he realized Rebecca sought to win him over, and decided to feign compliance to uncover her true intentions. Turning to Victor, Damien decisively agreed, instructing Rebecca to lead the way. She guided them to a grand, multi-story establishment surrounded by lush gardens. Rebecca explained that the building was Lady Chelsea's personal restaurant. As they entered, she revealed the entire place had been cleared for Damien's arrival. Glancing back, Rebecca told him Lady Chelsea awaited him in the private dining hall. Stepping through the door, Damien wondered what kind of offer Chelsea intended to make. As he crossed the threshold, his eye flared with purple energy. He had recognized a powerful, familiar scent. With a grave expression, he approached Chelsea, who was calmly pouring a glass of wine. As Damien and Chelsea sat across from each other in the opulent dining hall, he cut straight to the chase, demanding to know her reason for calling him. Chelsea immediately called out his quick temper, then suggested they wait for the food to arrive before continuing their conversation. Damien, refusing to waste any more time, demanded that Chelsea should speak her intentions immediately. With a slight smirk, Chelsea conceded she had no choice but to proceed, but only if Damien accepted her single condition. Chelsea, firm in her gaze, demanded Damien step down as the representative. Seeing Chelsea's firm stance, Damien subtly questioned if her demand for his withdrawal stemmed from a lack of trust in her own chosen champion, Guillermo Blackwing. Chelsea defiantly clarified that Damien was mistaken, asserting that if Sir Guillermo wielded his axe, someone like him would be utterly insignificant. Chelsea explained that her demand for Damien to step down was a strategic move to preserve her own strength in preparation for the upcoming duel with the Marquis family. Damien, arms still crossed, agreed that she has a point. Damien, understanding Chelsea's strategic move, swiftly challenged her, demanding to know what he would gain by conceding to her request to step down as the representative. Chelsea promised to fulfill all of Damien's wishes if he stepped down, but he challenged her, asking if she truly knew what he desired. Chelsea confidently smirked, asserting that a country noble like him would have obvious desires. Chelsea confidently declared that a country noble like Damien surely craved only money and fame, as he regarded her with skepticism. Damien internally fumed, finding Chelsea's arrogant judgment of him utterly infuriating. Damien fired back, suggesting the Duke himself was better suited to provide him with such things. Amidst the opulent setting, Chelsea countered, urging Damien to reconsider his current perception and think more deeply about her offer. Chelsea then offered a sly smile, emphasizing the strategic advantage of being in the future Duke's good graces. Damien's gaze fixed on the hourglass on the table, as he weighed Chelsea's audacious proposal. As sand steadily flowed through the hourglass, Chelsea pressed Damien to deliver her proposal to his father immediately. Surrounded by pulsing purple energy, Chelsea, sitting on a throne-like chair, commanded Damien to tell his father he would step down. As Chelsea's pulsing purple energy amplified her demand to step down, Damien remained silent, his gaze unwavering as he considered her audacious power play. Damien looked up with a smirk, flatly declaring his refusal. As Damien flatly refused, Chelsea appeared stunned, exclaiming in disbelief. Chelsea, utterly stunned by his refusal, gestured in disbelief and cried out that this wasn't how things were supposed to go. As Chelsea reeled in shock from his defiance, Damien smirked, realizing she was surprised he hadn't succumbed to her charm fragrance. The charm fragrance subtly amplified the target's desires, compelling them to yield to the user's demands. Possessing dark magic knowledge from his past life, Damien instantly sensed the charm fragrance. Damien, with a slight smirk, explaining that at this concentration, the charm magic would normally turn anyone into a slave within an hour. Damien's hand pulsed with purple energy, revealing his authority of greed effortlessly dispelled the charm magic. Chelsea, visibly distressed, sat at the table as Damien, standing nearby, mockingly demanded why her plans had so spectacularly failed, leaving her utterly stunned. Chelsea stammered, struggling to explain herself. Chelsea, her frustration clear, furiously questioned Damien's rejection, insisting she would grant his every desire. Damien stormed away from Chelsea, flatly rejecting any assistance and declaring that his true desires were entirely beyond her reach. Chelsea's face twisted with rage, as she furiously demanded to know what Damien could possibly want so desperately. He finally revealed his deepest desire, declaring it was his family's happiness. Chelsea's face contorted in disbelief, utterly bewildered by Damien's deepest desire. Damien, his profound desire revealed, swiftly declared his departure, leaving Chelsea stunned and seated within the vast room. As Damien departed, he sharply demanded a message be sent to Guillermo Blackwing. Prepare well for the duel. Chelsea bit her lip inward, a silent reaction to Damien's words. As Damien walked away, Chelsea said, "Your family must be really important to you, HUH." Unwilling to let Damien have the last word, Chelsea powerfully declared he must step down as representative, threatening to completely crush House Haxon. Suddenly, Chelsea is violently choked by Damien, and she furiously demands to know how they dared to lay a hand on her. Chelsea, still on the floor, struggles, while Damien was unnervingly silent. Violently thrashing against the tightening grip, Chelsea desperately demanded Damien release her. 2 guards burst into the room, immediately demanding to know the source of the loud disturbance, as Chelsea still struggled against Damien. The guards immediately draws their sword as they charge towards Damien, stating how dare he lays his hands on Chelsea. As guards stormed, Damien pulled his grip from Chelsea's throat as she desperately grasped for air. Damien, infuriated, instantly dashed through the armored guards. The guards' expression twisted in distress. Damien strode away from the defeated and kneeling guards. He declared their wounds were shallow, urging them to apply potions quickly to avoid death. He said that he would hold back from slitting her throat, deeming such a swift death too merciful a punishment for her. As Chelsea watched Damien walk away, Damien ominously told her to anticipate what comes next. He smirked, his thoughts chillingly focused on the horrific things poised to befall Chelsea next. Still on the table, Chelsea clutched her throbbing neck, the chilling weight of Damien's threats settling upon her. The armored men remained on their knees in the room, defeated by Damien's decisive assault. Suddenly, Rebecca bursts into the room, her eyes wide with shock at the devastating scene before her. Rebecca immediately rushed to Chelsea, who remained on the floor, urgently asking if she was all right. Chelsea's face twisted with pure rage, her mind set on a singular, deadly vow to kill Damien without fail. She shouted. With an outstretched hand and a surprised affirmation, the large, blue-clad Mustang Fury suddenly appeared, declaring he had come as soon as he was summoned. Chelsea furiously confronted him, demanding to know why her charm fragrance failed to affect Damien. He swiftly clarified that some rare individuals possess a strong immunity to dark magic, suggesting Damien might be one of them. Furious, Chelsea punches Mustang Fury in the face, scolding him as he cries out from the blow. Chelsea abruptly shifts focus, asking for Guillermo Blackwing's location. Mustang explained Guillermo was at the tavern, needing to blow off steam after the day's chaotic events. Chelsea exploded in fury, utterly bewildered that Guillermo was out drinking the night before his crucial duel, calling him a madman. Chelsea furiously confronted Mustang, demanding if he was truly certain Guillermo Blackwing could defeat Damien Haxon. Mustang confidently asserted that Guillermo was a Yulon masterpiece, proclaiming he possessed unparalleled dark magic affinity. Mustang then confidently assured Chelsea that they, the Yulon, would certainly deliver the Duke's house into her hands. Chelsea's eyes blazed red as she fiercely demanded Mustang uphold his word, chillingly warned him he would die first if they failed. Damien stands on a rooftop, gazing down with a determined expression. Later that day, Damien gripped his long sword. As he flicked a finger against the blade, he recognized the familiar presence he had sensed from Guillermo and cursed the dark mage's involvement, realizing Chelsea was tied to them. Damien sat ready with his glowing sword. He considered how he might explain his actions to the Duke, but decided it would be better to show him in person the following day. When the duel was about to begin, Guillermo entered the arena with a shout. Guillermo's fist clenched, ready for battle. His strength impressed the three observers watching from afar. Nearby, Pable's partner questioned who might win the fight. Pable reflected that Guillaume Blackwing should prevail based on reputation alone. The men expressed relief at the chance to escape Damien's brutal training. They declared the training had been nothing but savage beatings disguised as lessons, and that Damien clearly seemed to enjoy it. Although Pable hoped for Damien's defeat, he admitted, "I just don't see him losing at all." In the arena, Guillermo grinned, noting that Damien had not run away from their duel. Damien stretched his shoulders, while Guillermo dismissed the gesture as false calm. Adam arrived late, loudly announcing his presence. Adam declared that the winner of the duel would become the representative, and everyone must respect the outcome. Chelsea smirked, confident Guillermo would claim victory. The man on the throne raised a white cloth, signaling the start. As the cloth dropped, the duel began. Guillermo readied his strike, calling out Damien's name as his axe surged with purple energy. He grinned, confident Damien had made a grave mistake, as two spinning axes crackled with power beside him. Gripping his weapon tightly, Guillermo lunged forward, the axe blazing with purple energy, proclaiming himself the wild beast. In that instant, Damien's hand flicked, and his sword erupted with a brilliant blue wave of energy. Guillermo's expression shifted to shock as dark energy crackled around him. Damien unleashed the radiant blue power, deflecting Guillermo and his axe backward. Guillermo grimaced, groaning under the mounting pressure. Stunned, he demanded to know what had just happened. Chelsea and Rebecca watched in disbelief at the unfolding clash. Adam and Jael observed carefully as Adam noted Damien's strange technique, wondering what it could be. Raging internally, Guillermo cursed, "Damn it, and he calls himself a knight?" He advanced, demanding to know what trick Damien was using. Damien stood firm, sword at the ready, releasing a swirl of blue energy. The surge of energy slammed into Guillermo's shoulder. He winced, struggling against the assault. With a heavy exhale, he staggered, then his head snapped back as a wave of blue energy struck him full in the face. Wiping it away, Guillermo glared at Damien. Raising his glowing sword high, Damien declared that playtime was over. The sword radiated with potent blue energy. Driving the blade into the ground, Damien unleashed another powerful wave of energy. Guillermo writhed in pain, when suddenly a glowing purple aura erupted around him. Ernst and the others watched in shock as the unseen power revealed itself. Now on his knees, Guillermo vomited more black substance, struggling against the overwhelming force. The spreading corruption stained the ground while Damien watched from a distance. Adam questioned Guillermo's bizarre condition, then noticed the foam at his mouth. Chelsea, horrified, realized her schemes were about to be exposed. Guillermo continued to spew the black fluid as his skin began to wither. Calmly, Damien observed as Guillermo, still struggling, admitted that his true self had been revealed. As Guillermo collapsed to the ground, Damien declared him a false knight, watching as his flesh completely withered away. Meanwhile, Adam stood utterly stunned, questioning aloud whether Guillermo had truly been a fake knight. The onlookers watched in frozen disbelief as Guillermo's true nature was laid bare. As the spectators reeled from the horrifying revelation, Damien confirmed the shocking truth with grim resolve, his hand tightening around his weapon. He explained that Guillermo was a false knight who had enhanced his strength and mana through dark magic. The crowd reacted in utter disbelief, and one of them frantically warned that if the church discovered the use of dark magic, they would all face dire consequences. Adam silently wrestled with the staggering implications of Guillermo's true identity. As others looked on from above, Adam pressed Damien, demanding to know whether he had been aware of Guillermo's identity all along. Rising to his feet, Damien admitted that he had known, apologizing for not revealing it sooner. He declared that his intent had been to uncover everyone tied to Guillermo's dark magic first. The Duke, deep in thought, uttered a chilling realization, fearing the corruption extended to everyone. As Adam struggled with the truth, Damien confirmed that the dark magic indeed reached far deeper than anyone suspected, revealing that dark mages had infiltrated the ducal house. He then added ominously that there was more to the sinister plot. Damien's voice cut sharply as he called out to Chelsea. She stood defiantly, light swirling around her, but jolted at his words. Distressed, Chelsea vehemently denied any involvement, pleading desperately with her father. Adam's face tightened as he inwardly fought against the undeniable evidence, admitting the truth he desperately wished were false. Amidst the chaos and accusations, he questioned why the guards remained idle. Furious, Adam commanded the guards to seize everyone connected to Lady Chelsea and throw them into the dungeon for interrogation. Chelsea cried out in protest, insisting she was innocent and that it was all a terrible mistake. At the Duke's command, guards immediately seized Guillermo. Soldiers also moved into formation, swords drawn, to enforce the arrests and maintain order. Chelsea glared, realizing that her capture would expose everything. Knowing her arrest was imminent, she demanded her guards protect her. Her loyal knights affirmed her command, and two men clashed swords, initiating a battle to shield her from the Duke's decree. As the fight escalated, Adam let out a sharp breath while Chelsea gasped, calling out desperately for jail. Adam ordered her immediate arrest, and Jael accepted the command without hesitation. Moving swiftly through the chaos, Jael closed in as Chelsea strategically positioned herself among her knights. His gaze sharpened with grim resolve, intent on capturing her. Commanding the fighters to clear the way, Jael advanced, and the knights recoiled in terror, realizing they faced an opponent of overwhelming power. One knight shouted for Chelsea to flee while he held off the attackers, and she quickly agreed, making her escape. As she fled, Jael loosed a devastating strike wreathed in green energy through the air. The impact roared as Chelsea screamed, clutching her head. Her face trembled in fear, having barely dodged Jael's deadly blow. She turned toward her knights, only to see them collapse, cut down in an instant. Falling to the ground in shock, she recoiled as Jael approached menacingly. Cornered, she cried out for him to stay away, her eyes lifting to Ernst. Ernst appeared stunned as Chelsea shouted his name. She screamed for his help, and he cried out, rushing forward to shield her. Damien scoffed, dismissing Ernst as a fool. Jael regarded him coldly, declaring Ernst Horwitz a mid-class knight who had greatly contributed to the ducal house's rise. But if he chose to protect Chelsea, Jael announced, Ernst would be executed immediately. Conflicted and overwhelmed, Ernst shouted in anguish, uncertain if protecting her was wise. Groaning in distress, he finally collapsed, surrendering. Behind him, Chelsea knelt and called out desperately to him. Two armored men seized her as she cried out to her father. She begged Adam to listen, pleading her innocence. But Adam dismissed her as a useless fool. He declared that her actions could ruin their house and drag them all into disgrace. Looking regretful, he declared that her very birth had been his greatest mistake. Tears streamed down Chelsea's face as she cried out again, insisting she was innocent. Unmoved, Adam ordered the guards to gag her and take her away. Her pleas were silenced as the guards bound her mouth. She could only mumble desperate protests as they dragged her away, helpless. Screaming in fury, she turned her muffled cries toward Damien, who simply smirked, satisfied that she had been arrested for her ties to a dark mage.